Coming to you from the TLD studios in Temecula, California, it's the Whiskey Throttle Show, taking you deep inside the lives of the legends and leaders of our sport. This week's guest is brought to you by Yamaha, the leaders in the power sports industry. Motocross bikes, street bikes, adventure bikes, side-by-sides, quads, boats, generators. Yamaha sets the standard. Yamaha revs your heart. Method race wheels, the strongest, lightest, fastest wheels in off-road. Method dominates the off-road market with wheels for your truck, sprinter, Jeep, or UTV. Go to methodracewheels.com/whiskey throttle for 20% off your order. Troy Lee Designs, built for the world's fastest racers. TLD blends elite level protection with industry-leading style and performance. Moto, bike, helmet paint, casual wear, whatever your passion, Troy Lee Designs is waiting for you on the next level. Nihilo Concepts, enhance your riding experience with superior products like the Start-Stop Conversion Kit, Fuel Petcocks, Frame Grip Tape, Lever Grip, Grip Donuts, Secondary On Switch, Billet Foot Pegs, Billet Throttle Housings, and so much more. Nihilo Concepts produces exceptional products, all of which are made right here in America. And by SKDA. SKDA is the ultimate destination for exceptional motocross graphics, customer service, and artistic excellence. Trust them to elevate your ride and showcase your individuality on the track, making every ride an exceptional experience. Hey folks, thank you for joining us here at the Whiskey Throttle Show. I'm your host, David Pingree, and today we've got a great guest, somebody that has been on our list from the very beginning, and if you're a fan of moto history, you're going to love this. Mr. Gunnar Lindstrom. Now, is it Gunnar, or am I okay to say Gunnar?
It's Gunnar.
Okay, Gunnar. Yes. So that's how your buddy Mark Blackwell always says it.
But I'm used to just about it.
Well, it's great to have you on. You have such a rich history in our sport here in America and over in Sweden. And you're tied to the sport here. I don't know how many people know this, but your son Lars is the Honda team manager now. That's so right. Man, talk about a cool history. You managed that team for a few years in the late 70s into 1980, and now your son's taken over. That's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Yeah. And luckily he had a much better start than I did. You know, my start was kind of chaotic, at Honda. So we'll get to that.
We'll get to that for sure. Yeah. We start with our Method Race Wheels front end chatter. They bring in you the strongest, lightest, fastest wheels in off-road racing. If you guys want a discount on wheels, if you're in that market, 20% off using our code. You just go to methodracewheels.com/whiskey throttle, and they'll send you a 20% off code. It's a pretty good deal. So I got a couple questions to get started. I just want to ask you. You've been around this sport. One of very few guys, I would put DeCoster, maybe Mark, and a few of these guys in this category that's seen evolution from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and now into 2020. You've just seen such a big span of our sport. What are some of the advancements to you that were really, really important, really significant in motorcycles?
Well, in looking back at it all, suspension has got to be the big thing. That is the big thing. And we'll touch on that later and how it developed within Husqvarna and within the industry itself. And we were kind of allergic to some of those changes that we needed to make. But we'll come back to the start of the whole thing with the Yamaha and Håkan Andersson and the monoshock, and how we actually understood what actually happened around that time. And I think you'd agree with me when we get there. There was a lot of confusion as to why the Yamaha was so good.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And it makes sense when you say that, because I've ridden some late 70s, 79 YZ250s and some Makos. They went fast. Horsepower and speed have never been a problem.
That's right.
But getting them stopped and getting them to handle, that's it. Where the big advancement.
Getting through the hoops and getting them to stop.
That's right.
Same thing. Yep.
Well, very interesting. We'll dive more into that stuff because you had a big hand in a lot of that. And the other thing I got to ask you, and I feel free to share what you can or you want to, but with Lars now running factory Honda, week after week, I keep seeing Chase Sexton, and it's become like almost frustrating to me. My heart's breaking for this kid because he's out front, he's doing everything right, and then just out of nowhere, he goes down. And it's happened so many times this season. We've guessed maybe is it something with the suspension? Is there a setting? Is he just trusting his tire too much? Is he in his own head? What do you think's going on? And have you talked to Lars about it? And is he frustrated? I'm just curious to get your opinion of all this.
Well, I'm sure he's frustrated. We all are. But I intentionally don't talk about that kind of shop with Lars.
Okay.
Because he's got his hands full. He's got people that know and understand the bike better than I do. But if you want me to comment on it, the only thing I would say, you mentioned it, he's leaning on the front tire too much, and the tire gives way. Doesn't do what he expects it to do, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, because a lot of those crashes are sort of front end tuck or front end push, but then we've had some where the back end comes around and you just go, what just happened? I can't figure it out. But
But he is the fastest.
Oh,
and therefore those things happen
Yeah.
to the fastest person.
True.
If you back off from that, you may be steady through everything, but
yeah.
the fastest.
I gotta believe his time's coming. He'll get there.
Oh, he
right?
will. He's
Yeah.
a kid.
Yeah.
And he will, and he'll learn.
So how often does Lars ever call you and ask you questions or lean into you for advice or suggestions? No?
Nah.
Does he know? Does he know what a resource he
we never
has?
talk shop. It's
Oh, really?
That's intentional,
Okay.
because he's been there, he knows.
Yeah.
And I'm an old timer, and I don't really have anything. If there's anything we've talked about recently, it is how to build a new semi-trailer for the team. We've had some discussions about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Layout and things like that.
Well, and the electrical system and
Right.
all the other things. So those trailers are complicated. I came to find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good stuff. Hey, quick reminder, get over to whiskeythrottlemedia.com if you guys haven't seen all the content we have over there. New merch. We've got a forum. Lots of cool things. And we are building a whole bunch of new merch. Also, elevateactionsports.com if you're looking for some coaching, some incredible online coaching there. Ryan Hughes, Jeff Emig, Grant Langston, Johnny Campbell, and myself. We've got media training classes in there. There's sports psychology classes. Really anything you need to improve. Highly recommend checking that out. And our guest is brought to you today by Yamaha. If you guys have not gone to a Yamaha dealer and seen all the products they have, whether you're looking for off-road, motocross, side-by-sides, they really set the standard. So we appreciate them being involved here with us. All right, tell me about your hometown in Sweden. I couldn't pronounce the name. I wrote it down.
Well, in translation, it means Oak Lake.
Okay.
Oak Lake.
Okay.
And it's a real little city. It's 10,000 people. And I don't think it has grown very much. And that is intentionally, they've kept it small. It's a lot of tradition. It's 600 years old. So it's got some of those old streets, that they had, were very narrow. And there were horse stables where you parked your horses while you did your shopping on Saturday if you were a farmer or, what have you. So I came out of there. My dad was a farmer, and I grew up on the farm. And when I came to go to school at 7 years of age, I hadn't seen the city very much, so I was all surprised about seeing here's a fire engine,
Oh, really?
There's people working with jackhammers, and I stood for hours, literally for hours, watching construction work being done on a house or a road or something like that. So
Just fascinated by...
all this new stuff, I had no idea, because I was farm boy, and cows and a few pigs, I suppose. And
What a cool childhood, though, right? I mean,
yeah.
compared to today,
Yeah.
what a juxtaposition.
Yeah, and I stood there by one of these guys. He had a jackhammer on, and I remember to this day, big gloves he had it, and he's hammering away on the asphalt, and I'm looking, I'm saying, I wonder if I will ever grow up to be as big so I can have my own jackhammer and hammer away on the street. Yeah.
That's great. You were born in 1943, is that right?
Yep.
What do you remember about the war? Was that an impact on you at all at the time, or were you just
Not
kind
at
of
all.
insulated from that?
Not at all. Nothing. There's one thing I remember from that, actually, when I think about it. In my class, when I started, at seventh grade, when I was 7 years old, there was actually 2 or 3 people from Finland and one from Austria, which we called war kids. They were there, in other words, they had left their country because of the war.
Oh, right.
And they were now growing up in Sweden.
Kind of asylum seekers or that type of thing?
Yeah, I would say so. And now in Ukraine, people have fled the country and now they live in Poland or Sweden for that matter too. So we had a couple of those kids, and I don't know what happened to those, of course, because, people move around and
Right.
school, this and that. And so I don't know whether they stayed in there, but I remember it quickly. Adele was the name of a girl from Austria. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you have siblings as well, right? You have
Two brothers.
two brothers.
Two brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of them tragically passed. We'll talk about that, but I wanted to ask you this. In Sweden, so my heritage is all Norwegian.
Right.
And
I'm
so,
sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Oh, man.
We tried to saw Norway off and let it float out into the ocean, but it wouldn't go. They should be fishing. Now
It's because the Vikings just held on and they kept it there.
Yeah, now they got a oil now. They're just unbearable.
Oh, boy. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering if there's any, I always found it fascinating the way the naming was, right? My grandfather's name was Svensson, so it's Sven's son.
Yeah.
And if you're a CrossFit fan, there's Katrin, David's daughter. The DOTTIR, that's your daughter, right?
That's your daughter.
Does Sweden have anything like that or no?
It's not common.
Okay.
Not common.
Okay.
I think you have to go back a few hundred years for that to be a common thing.
Okay.
What have you. So it remains in some, families, you keep it up going. But I've, in my world, so to speak, where I lived and where I knew people, never happened.
Yeah. Okay. Do you go back quite a bit to visit?
I used to go back once a year.
Yeah.
But not so much anymore.
Yeah. Neat to see that it doesn't change, huh? It's probably, is my guess. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing that I thought was interesting as I was kind of going through your story, they didn't allow you to race till you were 16. Not at all.
Not at all.
Why was that? And
Well, you were supposed to have a driver's license. That was it. Right?
Because really that was all there was street legal bikes that you guys would kind of modify into.
Oh, yeah. There was no motocross bikes.
Yeah.
The first one I recall, well, we had the Husqvarna bikes. Starting in 58, we had some pretty decent bikes. Not that I worked there at the time, but I was just a kid. But from 58 and on, there were factory bikes at Husqvarna.
Oh, wow.
They worked. And you could buy Greaves. CZs came in a few years later. I think you have to wait until 74 when the CZs became good. The twin pipes and all that stuff that came first. And from then on, it grew, the Spanish, Bultaco, Montesa, USA, and nothing really from Italy at the time, but that was...
What a neat time when all those countries, everybody was producing bikes, now we're kind of down to 5 or whatever it is, but at the time it was just this country, that bike would do really well. Then Mako, Germany produces Makos, and then it was interesting.
What's fascinating is that after the war, there were a lot of German scientists. Some of them, of course, von Braun came over here to build rockets, but many of them stayed and started to open consulting businesses all over Germany. And there was one by the name of Müller, and he actually designed some of the Husqvarna silver peel cylinders with the chrome bores.
Oh.
And and we had a cylinder that was special. We called the Müller cylinder in Sweden. And they consulted with Uppsala, in northern Sweden, with a company called Nymans that Torsten Hallman was actually an apprentice at. So there were a lot of these German consultants. I suppose they were rocket scientists. And I was just reading about the guy that did the two-stroke, Walter Madden, and he for the MZ, that happened to land in the eastern side of the fence when the border was secured after the war. But the MZ factories were just fantastic people. And he's the one that's sort of the father of the two-stroke, because he invented what we call the expansion chamber and how to make two-strokes go. And eventually he was all sold to Suzuki. Long story, a book written about it called Speed for Sale that you should look up, that I'm reading as we speak.
I will definitely check that out. That's fascinating. So these were people during the war who were developing rockets and military machines, or
okay.
Wow.
And a lot of the two-stroke engines came to be developed as starter engines for aircraft, and small, powerful little units that you could power something with, maybe a generator. So the war was responsible for the two-stroke engine to be advanced in many stages. Not its final stage, because that came later. With Walter Cotton and his rider Ernst Degner, and both of them eventually moved to Suzuki. I'm sure you're aware of all that.
Yeah. That's fast. I didn't know that history from the war, though. It's crazy what comes out of that, know.
And MZ was very, very good at enduros, 6 days, that kind of stuff. They had their own team. And eventually, of course, that went into road racing, and that's where Degner was dominant and eventually sold or took all the stuff with him and escaped. He actually escaped out of Eastern Zone and fled into Germany and eventually ended up at Suzuki in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
Fascinating stuff.
Did you do anything else as a boy in terms of sports before you really got into bikes, or was it just really farming? I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, if you're a kid, PE in school is hockey in the winter and soccer in the summer.
okay.
And I don't know if you have much of a choice, but everybody does it. And
Those were the ones.
So I was a decent hockey player, for a high school, and I was not much of a soccer player, but I did play.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had teams.
Those were the two sports you absolutely did. Pretty much everybody.
That's
huh?
it.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
it.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Your dad, did he ride?
No.
Okay.
No, he passed away when I was 7.
Yeah.
And
Car accident? Or
No, he was actually a horse
Oh,
rider.
of course, that's right. He was okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your dad for a second. Because tragic for a kid, and that's a terrible age to lose your dad.
Yeah.
But he was an Olympic javelin thrower. Mm-hmm. Held a world record for a couple of years, and then got into equestrian.
Yep.
Was very good in that, and had a bad accident that ended up killing him.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Do you have a lot of memories of your dad, or I mean, at 7, you're pretty young.
Very little,
Yeah.
because he was, of course, he was a consultant to other farms, so he traveled a lot, and he, came up. Well, he didn't come up with. He worked on new ideas and whatnot. So our little farm was the first to have some equipment, that they were trying out to see.
Okay.
And often at our farm, buses came with other farmers from other areas to study. And I remember my father standing in front of these guys, one of those hats on, the little brim on it, and he had a cane, not because he needed it, but he is pointing out, and here we do this and here we do that. And then there was some Q&A, and we were able to sit on the side and see the stuff, because the reason we're sitting there is, but at the end of this, there were free soda pop.
You're
So
earning
that's
your
where we
soda.
came in.
Yeah. Fast. What did you guys grow on your farm?
Oh, it was all about dairy, so there was all about alfalfa and things for the farm, for the animals, for the winter.
Gotcha. So how did you get introduced to bikes? What was your first experience? See, I think I read something about you heard a bike or saw a bike go by.
Oh yeah.
Tell me that story.
Well, so after my father passed away, we had a contract to come in to run the farm itself, because it was our mom and 3 kids.
Were you the oldest brother?
I was the oldest. Yeah.
So you're not old enough to take over. And
No.
even back then, seven's a little.
We'll
too
come
young.
to that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, but for this, so we had a contract to come in, and he had a son that was a little bit older than I was, 10 years older, and he bought a bike. He had a Royal Enfield 350 that he bought, and I know at school you had a bicycle to school, of course, because there was no school buses. So on my way home, we had a big hill at the end, so I'm kind of pushing my bike up this hill. And here comes this guy with a Royal Enfield 350.
Yeah.
First time I see it. And he, obviously, when he sees me, he's going to show off. So he guns that thing and goes up the hill. And I was looking at this bike going by, and I was just completely blown away. And from the tire, there was actually a little bit of roost coming out. He's throwing some little stones out from the back. And I'm going, wow, that's something I want to do.
Yeah.
So that was my first impression, my first image of anything that was different.
And it really stuck with you, it sounds
stuck
like.
with me.
Yeah.
Still remember it.
That's crazy.
And I can go to this place today within 6 feet and tell you exactly where it was.
How cool is
He'll
that? It's
still
probably
be-
unchanged out there.
Unchanged.
Yeah.
Completely.
What kind of racing or motorcycle competition? Was it just trials and scrambles at the time, or what even was there?
Well, everything is done through clubs in Europe at the time. So the clubs have members, you've got to join and be a member, and then you can join their races and their events. And you actually of course, be a worker, on Saturday to prepare the track. So there were some trials, there were some enduros, and there were motocross, which is
There
actually-
was motocross around there. Okay.
There was, yeah. And that's what I wanted to go to. But in order to go to, there were not that many races, and you had to enter by mail before you go to a race and get a letter back saying, you have been accepted to this event in the junior class, and your number will be 22. So you had to change every week too. So that's why you see all these number plates from those days, hand painted, because you're given a number for each event.
Huh.
So that's how it
Interesting.
works. So yeah, that's what I did.
And then I find this fascinating, and I think there's good to it, but you guys had a mandatory military time.
Mm-hmm.
How old is post high school? So you're 18?
Yep, that's when it starts.
Okay.
And if you were in college, you can get it deferred a few years, but you never really escape from it. You always have to do it.
Okay, well, I guess then that comes a little later. So before that, tell me about your first race. You turned 16, and I'm sure you're chomping at the bit.
The same day, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. The first race that happened to come up was a trials race.
Okay.
But I didn't care. So
you're just looking any kind of motorcycle race.
Anything I can do with my bike, So
Which was what, by the way?
Silverpillen.
Okay.
Yeah. That's how all of the Swedes started. Well, not exactly true, because Monarch, which was our arch competitor at the time, they had another bike, that sort of faded away eventually. And the reason for that was that they didn't have their own engine. They had to buy an engine out of Germany. There were a lot of engine makers in Germany after the war. Now we're back, right?
Yep.
Sox and RD and DKW and probably 5 or 6 or 7 of them, ILO, that made engines, because that's their expertise coming out of the war. So that's what they did. And the Monarch engine was called RD. And it was a good little engine, but it needed development, and they had no control over it. So one of my sayings that I have carried with me through the years: you cannot be a successful motorcycle manufacturer unless you control your own engine. Look at Greaves. It was a great people.
Yeah, but you're at a huge disadvantage if
they were
you
stuck with the engine.
Yeah.
They should have done their own engine, which of course is not easy.
Yeah. So how was this Silverpillen?
We'll come to that eventually, but the strength of it was that it was light. It was built to a formula that described lightweight motorcycles in Sweden. If it was only 75 kilo, which I think is like 168 pounds, you were lightweight and you could ride it when you were 16. If it was heavier than that, you had to be 18 to ride it and have another license.
Okay.
License. You had
Gotcha.
to. Yeah. So that's government for you, but that's what they did. So, but we'll come back to that later. That particular fact that the bike was built to a standard of 75 kilo turned out to be an advantage to us all the way up through the years, ending in 71. And we'll come to that. Why 71 going into 72 is important.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Okay. So you do this trials race. I mean, that wasn't your kind of what you really wanted to do, but did you still just love it, or what do you remember from it?
Anything, riding your bike, that was what you wanted to do. And competition and painting your number on the side of the bike, was actually what you wanted to do, and now you're a big dude, you think, even though you're
telling all your friends you're a motorcycle racer, all that.
That's right.
Yeah. So what do you remember a lot from that event? You remember everything about it?
I remember where it was. I remember some of the sections we rode on the bike, but I can't recall how I finished.
Yeah, okay.
How many points I had or didn't have and that kind of stuff.
A couple dabs along the way, I'm sure.
I'm sure there were.
So what came, then did you finally get into some motocross and scrambles?
Right. Exactly. And as soon as I finished high school, I wanted to work with bikes to learn how to do it. And there was one shop in town that had it, and they worked on motorcycles. It's a small town, right? So this one shop, and I befriended the guy that actually owned it, and he became my mentor. And I eventually worked there. He taught me. He was my mentor in that. Taught me how to use tools and how to weld and how to keep yourself organized. Great guy. His name is Bengt Kling.
Okay.
And Bengt Kling was my first mentor. And he taught me
engine building too and things like that, or
to some extent. We worked mainly on chainsaws. As far as numbers of units we worked on, chainsaws was the number one item. Husqvarna, of course.
Of course,
because that's all there was at the time.
Yeah.
And but eventually, a lot of motorcycle stuff. We had some old 4-strokes, some BSAs, Gold Stars, that kind of stuff. But I never really took to that much because it was. To me, already old, and I was into new 2-strokes and lightweights and kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that 4-strokes back then were like, that's old technology. This 2-strokes is the new cool
stuff. Just at the verge of, when, from the AJS and the Litos and, and the Husqvarna 4-strokes were given away to the 2-strokes. And I never got into that. I never competed on the 4-stroke at that time.
Little sidebar here. I'm jumping way out of chronological order, but do you find it interesting that we're now back to 4-strokes? Because the 2-stroke, when you break it down, it's like it's lighter. You can get more horsepower out of half the cc's. Like it just seems like such a simpler and better design. But because of environmental or whatever the reasons, we're back to 4-strokes again. Good and bad. I don't know. What's your take on it? It's just so interesting to me how we've gone back and forth. And will we go back again? Maybe one day.
I'm really divided, because what you stated is true. Lightweight and easy to maintain and cheaper to buy and all. I suppose the 4-stroke could run a little bit longer if it needs. But then again, doing an overhaul on the 4-stroke is nothing you do yourself in the basement.
And expensive.
And expensive. Yeah. So it's a real dilemma. I understand both sides. I really haven't taken a position, no stand on, we ought to go this way. Or we ought to, maybe what we could do is to keep the 125s 2-strokes, as a beginner class. And
man after my own heart.
Moved up.
That's exactly what I think. I think that's such a great bike to learn.
Right.
And I tell this story all the time. My cousin wanted to get into riding. Right. He was going to buy a 250F used. And I said, man, you screw something up and blow that up, you're done. You might as well just give the bike away.
Yeah.
I said, buy a Yamaha 125. There is a million parts for them everywhere. They're very simple.
Yeah.
Well, he screwed up the filter putting it on.
Right.
Like after having it a month, maybe there's something was off and it sucked a bunch of dirt and blew up. And if this was a 250F, you'd be out. Oh, right. You're not going to find thousands of dollars. I mean, he was
that's right.
mowing lawns to pay for this stuff basically.
Yep.
And we got him a new piston and ring and, got him back going again pretty cheaply. So I like what you're saying. I think that's absolutely accurate. So did you know at this time, I want to do something with engines, like building engines? You had a very, wanted to learn more about engine building and mechanics and things like that in general, it seemed like. Or were you still thinking, I want to be a racer? Right as you kind of finished in high school.
The racer part never disappeared.
Yeah.
That was always there.
Yeah.
But I think the means to get there was not so much through engines, because that was a little bit beyond what I could comprehend at the time as a kid. But suspension I could appreciate and understand. So as an apprentice at this shop, we built front and rear suspension for the silver pillion that I had and converted it, with the right linkage forks and the girdling shocks and all that stuff.
Okay.
And that shop I worked for, and Mr. Kling, he became quite famous in the neighborhood for converting bikes to better suspensions. We never did much with engine. We did a little, and he did a little, and we built expansion chambers because literally the first time we had one, the guy at Husqvarna, his name was Jauren. Mr. Jauren actually drew us literally on a napkin. You ought to build it like this and it ought to be expanded, you had the end of it and then you have a tailpipe and that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing we had. And that information came right out of East Germany and, Walter Kaden, who was the MZ guy and whatnot. So
and that's building an expansion chamber, there's a science to that.
Oh, yeah.
I've watched Mitch at Pro Circuit back in the early 90s building cone pipes and I'm just like,
yeah.
Wow, how do you know? How do you, and he'd try to explain it to me, and I'm like, it's way over my head. I
suppose there could be mathematical formulas, but when it comes down to the end of it, it's all about whatever you do as far as building and trying. If you went to a lab that did 2-strokes, you'll see exhaust pipes hanging. I'm sure Mitch had the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah, a lot of it was just trial and error.
Yeah.
They'd spend all day. It was a gentleman. Do you remember Mike Hooker?
Remember? I know the name, but no the person.
He's building all of Toyota's engines for NASCAR now. I mean, that's how far he went. But he was Mitch's main guy.
Right.
And he would spend all day building a cone pipe. He'd be so excited. He'd come running up with it. I can't wait to try this. And it would be terrible. And I'm like, Hook, it's not good. He's like, And,
bottom end torque versus top end, and mid complicated.
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
So how long after you graduated high school did you have to go into your military time? And pretty much right away?
No, I had actually a wait of 2 years.
Oh.
Right. So I went in there.
Okay.
But I did, and here's another good story because in my little city, there was actually a regiment, you call it that? Army fort, And now, of course, I knew most of the people there, the officers and whatnot, because as I grew up, the officers' kids went to the same school I did.
Right.
So we were often at other people's homes, and what have you, had the Saturday night parties and that kind of stuff at their houses. So I got to know most of the officers,
Okay.
the higher ranked people too.
Okay.
So when I came, to registering, for being drafted, I requested to be at that place, at home, and I could almost see my home from where I was, and on the regiment there.
That's
So,
best case scenario.
best case scenario. So if food wasn't any good, I would actually go home, have lunch at home.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that happened a few times, not many, but I could do that. So, and also I applied to be a motorcycle rider, within there. We had motorbikes. Swedish Army did and did it here too in America, but it's kind of faded away, too dangerous, I guess, and whatnot. But I actually rode a Jawa 250 for the entire 10 months there, and had a good time.
That's great. So the 2 years you waited to get enlisted, then you were just working with Bengt and working at his shop?
Racing.
And
Yeah.
racing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And how were you doing locally racing? Had you gone to the expert class, or where did you get to?
We had to, same as I suppose we had to graduate through, gather some, enough points. And I can't recall exactly when it was, but I had enough points and I moved up. And I remember thinking, well, when I was in junior class and you look at the list of people that are lining up, I can beat that guy, I can beat that guy, I can beat that guy. You can beat everybody, right? But then you look at the starting list of the expert class, it was called at the time. I said,
I can't beat him.
I can't beat anybody of these guys,
Yeah.
So you kind of have a reset in your mind, and you figure, I'll start from the back and try to pass a few people.
Yeah.
So it took a little while, but I eventually won a race or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a fun, everyone can relate to that, right? We've all gone through that, starting at the bottom and kind of inching your way towards the front, and then, okay, now I'm the best here, or I'm one of them.
Exactly.
And then you step up and you go, oh,
Yeah.
here we are again.
Yeah. But what happened here, now I'll lead a little bit here, but
Okay.
because the farm was of course run by the contractor, and eventually
Owned by your mother,
my mother, and the family.
but the government would come in. Was it a government entity? Or?
No, it's just
okay.
a regular contracted guy that came in to be run the farm and had his own machinery and had his own animals and whatnot, and it was a family, and that was expected that I would eventually be running the farm, I suppose.
Yeah, I would assume that's kind of just, you just go into your father's
And the
land,
same
right?
thing with a friend I had next door, in the farm next door. And, so he was going to go through farm school. And he said, you really ought to give that some thought. And my mother encouraged it also.
Mm-hmm.
So they encouraged me to go to farm school. So I did. And it happened to be not far from Husqvarna itself. My farm wasn't that far from Husqvarna either, but this was even closer, right?
Okay.
So one day, I'm riding my bike, and trying to be good, going to farm school. So I figured, I'm going to go to Husqvarna and see if I can get a job. So I go there and I bang on the door, and I knew a couple of people there from meeting him at the races. So I met this one guy, Mr. Hellman, chief engineer. I said, what, I really like to. He said, nah. He says, no. We don't hire any riders or anybody else, but we hire engineers. We don't hire mechanics. So we hire engineers. I figured, So it didn't take many days until I'm actually researching engineering schools, right? And this is in the summer of 62, something like that.
Okay.
So I got in as the last place on an engineering school that fall.
Okay.
And because they had a cancellation. And so I went through, I gave up on farming school, and I went through engineering
Now,
school.
was your mom bummed about that? Was there like an expectation, I'm sure, that you would do that?
Yeah.
Was she disappointed, or was she like, hey, make your own path?
There was a time there when my mom was kind of against riding bikes, and, I didn't think I needed to hide it or anything like that, but she wasn't really supportive. But at the end, when she realized that I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit, she was supportive,
Okay.
and so that changed, and whatnot. So, I'm going through engineering school and 2.5 years.
So it was a full 2.5-year program.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and so I'm graduating, and I'm literally running back to Husqvarna, banging on the door, saying, "I'm here. I'm an engineer. Hire me." And they go, I don't think we remember you very well. Have you been here before? I said, yeah, don't you know? I was. So anyway, after some talking, I got to be the test rider on the new Army bike. They had a new Army 250 old green bike that needed to be put miles on every day. So I had to do about 200 kilometers, 120 miles or so a day on this bike, you know, what have you. So I did that for
just dirt road. Where would you go?
I could go anywhere I wanted, as long as I put 200 miles on it, you know, or 200 kilometers on it. Yeah. So at the time, I used to ride down to Rolf Tiblin's place. At the time, he lived in southern Sweden. It was about 100 kilometers there. So
and how'd you know Rolf? Just from racing?
For some racing, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because, you know, we hang out. That gives me some thought to where I did meet Rolf the first time. Nevertheless, he is down there. He had his career was finished. He's thinking about starting a restaurant and a hotel business in southern Sweden. Okay. So I went down there, you know, and we have lunch and occasionally say, hey, we're going to go stretching or working out. So I said, come on here, you know. So, you know, I reluctantly would join him, you know, in some workout there, but put all my stuff back on, get on my bike and drive back home. Yeah. Skis on in the winter and the whole thing. Yeah.
Fun job.
Fun job. And Rolf said, you know, I remember you telling me this. Says, you don't think this really helps you as far as your racing goes? Says, anything you do on two wheels will help you. Even if it's just street riding, you know, you get the balance and you get, you know, the reflection of, be reflective of this and that. So I took his word for it and I rode that bike every day.
Rode everywhere. Yeah. So then you obviously delayed your military time quite a bit, or was this after military?
That was after military.
Oh, after military. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So was there anything you took away from that military time that you think helped you down the road? I find it's, you know, to me, we obviously don't do that here, but I know like David Villemin, he had to go into the French military for a year, and it was a little bit different. As a high level athlete, he was given some benefits that maybe others weren't, but I think it gives you a good foundation of structure and discipline that maybe as young kids, you know, very few of us are born with that, right? That has to be something that's developed. Anything like that come out of that for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. To be organized and to be on time and to understand the repercussions if you weren't, you know, what have you. So I learned quite a bit on that. And also you learn other kids, you know, how they come and the approach they have and the background they have. And you're thinking, you know, how can this guy even survive, you know, because he has no understanding what's going on. He doesn't do this. And then again, there's other people that are very organized and you're saying, well, I want to be like that guy, right? Yeah. So you have certain, you know.
So at what point, you lost your mom and your brother in a car accident. How old were you? Was this post-college?
Yes, post-college.
I mean, this is a lot of tragedy, man, for a 7-year-old and then now early 20s. Yeah. That affect you or what? Jeez.
At the time, it was very confusing, you know, because I had lost any guidance. And in particular, I don't want to say my mom was just a mom. My mom was good, but she was leading the house, so to speak, whatever. Yeah. But my dad, whom I'd lost a lot earlier, it turns out later, he was really an organizer, you know. He was a guy that would lead. He would have been part of maybe city, you know, management, that kind of stuff. He had all kinds of credentials he had done. And I would have learned a lot from him. Yeah. At the same time, if he had stayed alive, I wouldn't be in motorbikes.
You'd have definitely gone into farming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And horses and that kind of stuff. So you reflect on that kind of stuff now and you say, what would have happened? You know, as you go through life, there's what I call life intersections.
Yeah.
You go up and here you are, you go this way or you go that way, and there's really no way back. Once you've decided, you're going to carry on, you know, because the other things cut off and whatever. So, and one of those happened as an apprentice at school. I was working at a gas station and you know, pumping gas, because at the time nobody pumped their own gas, you know. And the guy that owned the station, his name was Emil, and Emil fell. It was cold in winter. He fell on the ice where they had been washing cars and driving him outside, and broke his knee, and he ended up in the hospital, you know. And he's like, and then of course, me and another guy, we were trying to take over and run the thing. I said we should, But at some point we were out of gas, literally. I mean, there was nothing left. So we have to go up to the guy at Husqvarna and say, what do you do? You know, he says, oh my gosh, you're going to take the money here, and they're mostly cash, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you deposit it here, and then they will deliver. So we learned how to run a gas station. And after a week or two of that, I'm up there saying, now we need to do so and so. He says, you know what? He says, I'm ready to give up this gas station stuff. He says, do you want to take it over? You want to be, I'll sell it all the inventory or whatnot to you. And that was my first life.
That was the split in the road.
Intersection, yeah. I said, should I do that? Should I go? So of course I said, I'm a motor boy. I want to go ride my bike. I don't want to own a gas station. So that was my first decision in real life.
But you were giving it some very real consideration.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would that have been? You'd have been just a gas station owner, never,
Yeah. Maybe done something else, and But anyway, yeah.
Those are fascinating, right? When you look back and go, man, what would my life have done
if I'd done that?
Yeah,
exactly.
Interesting. So, yeah, I can't imagine losing my both parents and my sibling in these tragedies at such a young age. I just can't imagine it.
Yeah.
So, but you found a way to, carry on and kind of find a way to look back and find a silver lining, it seems like. It brought you into something that you love that you would have otherwise not.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it was a confusing time. I can tell you that.
I'm sure, geez.
But I didn't get arrested. I didn't have any brushes with the law, which is easy to do.
Right.
At that kind of time.
No father. Was your mom pretty strict? Did she?
Yeah.
She probably had to take over, basically take on both roles.
But my mentor, Bengt Kling, he was the guy that gave me values, and you need to do this, you need to understand this, and this is how it works. So he was the one actually that really gave me some goals in life and a direction to go and things to learn, and what friends to avoid and which friends to stick with.
He became a father figure for you.
Did.
That's great.
He did.
So you started testing these bikes with Husqvarna, and at what was kind of the next step for you there?
Well, I did a lot of
riding. Were you
riding.
still racing? Like
Oh, yeah.
weekends?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
On my own stuff, too. Yeah. So, this is 65, 66, 65 going into 66. And at the time, we are selling bikes. Husqvarna is selling bikes. They started in 63 with 100 bikes, which, was very, very good because they were so light and they were quite powerful. And not as powerful as some other bikes were, but the weight made up for it, right? And that's something we reflect on even to this day. What is the value of certain parameters, weight and rotating, this and that. Yeah. So the bike was very good. And Edison Dye comes there in 66, right? And there had been a lot of people coming to Husqvarna, right? I've seen letters written to Husqvarna from people in America saying, I want to be the importer of Husqvarna to America. And they would always write back a very, a polite letter saying under the circle, in English, and there would be 3 letters, 3 copies with what they call a carbon paper in between. Yep. So, no computer stuff, right?
No.
And I saw somebody saying you put a little stamp on it at the corner saying here's how it's going to be filed. And it said, we are very pleased to get your inquiry about the moment we're not able to. Why would we sell? They didn't say that, but the idea was, why would we sell bikes to a country where we have motocross bikes? Why would we sell bikes to a country where there's no motocross? So they said, this is silly, So Edison Dye had a different idea, and all these other people that had written before and got it in negative, Edison Dye I'm sure he got a letter too, but he took the bull by the horn. He traveled there. He went there. He says, I want to talk. And he said, finally he convinced 2 of the export people saying, if I send you money for 2 bikes, will you sell them to me? And there they are saying, yeah, I guess, what the hell are we going to do? And that broke the ice so he sent money for 2 bikes. They were sent over in, I think, in Feb of 66.
Okay.
And we still have records of that somewhere. The bikes came in. And
what a cool piece of paper if you could find that.
Exactly. Huh? Well, I don't have it, but,
right.
Don Incy that sells and has the records like that. He probably has some. And one bike went to Malcolm Smith, and the other bike was kept as a shop bike, and they used it to loan it out to various people in San Diego. Billy Silverthorne was one of the early ones that got to ride it.
Okay.
Malcolm had his own bike, and of course his story about how he got on the bike is actually current today, because the AMA magazine, there are stories in there, that are actually written from his book. And his book, Malcolm's book, is fascinating.
I'll have to look at it. Wow.
Yeah.
So is that's not the bike he was famous for riding in Baja?
That came later,
much later,
yeah,
right?
But
So you were still racing at the time, though, and I read where you were traveling to like New Zealand. You kind of traveling all around, including here in the U.S.
Yep.
So while you're doing that work at Husky, you're still actively racing.
Right.
Was there Grand Prix at the time?
No, well, here's what happened. So in '67, there's a guy in New Zealand by the name of Tim Gibbs, and he had been racing in Europe, and he had raced Grand Prix, and he was a very good rider. Now he retired, moved back to New Zealand, but he wanted to see, some of the Euro people coming. So every year he invited 2 or 3 Euros to come there and ride, and it would be part of they call it Rothman's International Circus or something like that.
Okay.
So long story short, I was invited, and 2 Americans were invited. One other named Bud Eakins, Bud Eakins, right? The movie guy, and another guy from England by the name of John Lewis, who's a very, very good rider, but whom I've never seen since.
Okay.
But anyway, so I get a ticket, and I'm getting.
And this traveling to New Zealand at the time, like how exotic, right? I mean,
my first time on a big airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a 34-hour plane ride, through London and Singapore and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, man.
And I get there, and we shipped the bike through Husqvarna. I built a big crate for it, sent it down by boat.
Months and months ahead of time.
Oh,
probably.
yeah, months ahead of it. And do you have time for this whole story?
Yeah, no, I love it.
New Zealand is interesting because...
When I went and did a race in Taupo, where Ben Townley is from, I mean... What a beautiful country.
Yeah.
I'm blown away at how amazing it was. So that's why I wanted to ask about it.
So we get there, and this is before security at airports, There's all these people from the club with their club jerseys on, standing at the bottom of the stairs off the airplane, and I get off the airplane with my Husqvarna shirt on, and I go, ah! So the first thing they do, they take you to the local pub to drink beer, right?
Yeah.
So we did. And they're trying to tell me, well, tomorrow we're going to meet here again because there's going to be a guy from America coming. I said, who's that? Well, they said we had initially invited Bud Eakins. But he, of course, something happened. He's got to do some movie, something. So Bud had actually, which I learned later, asked around saying, who is the best rider around here these days? And people saying, J.N. Roberts. So he said, call him up, say, J.N., you want to go to... Yeah. So he said, I got to send him a bike. So he brought a brand new Husqvarna 360. They emptied the oil out and fuel out, and he laid it flat on a pallet, literally on a pallet, and strapped it to a pallet.
Shrink wrapped it up and
sent it air freight to New Zealand. And I was there when it came, so I know this is true.
Yeah.
We actually unzipped it and took it off, the pallet. But no parts, no nothing, because I had a lot of parts in my box, right?
Yeah.
So Jane and I became good friends, and he became one of my mentors in English, So he would teach me, and I had no idea.
How was your English at the time?
A little school English, but, what we call motocross English.
Gotcha.
You know the right words for having a big crash and that kind of stuff. But he became my mentor, and one of the things where we're driving, we're listening to a song called Big Bad John. And Big Bad John, I don't know if you heard about it. He's a big dude. He's in the mine with his fellows, and the mine is starting to cave in. And he is the big guy, and he stands there and holds the mine up, so that all his fellows can escape.
Okay.
And he's Big Bad John, and he's in there, and the mine is collapsing, He doesn't make it out, And so Jan is saying, Gunnar, he's dead. That means he's dead. And I'm going, okay. And that was the end of the line for Big Bad John.
Yeah.
And that Jan taught me. That means he's dead.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I learned.
That was one of your first English lessons.
Well, I mean, a little more refined.
Yeah. Well, Jay, he was an off-road legend here, right? He was Baja and a lot of
We
big
was
off-road.
at the time desert.
Desert,
and
yeah.
he had just done the Baja 1000. I think the second one ever run was done that fall of '67, if I'm not incorrect.
It's just so fast. I know we're a pretty small sport, but his son Jimmy
Yeah.
is one of the main stunt coordinators in Hollywood now.
Oh, yeah.
Got me into a couple of movies that I've done. Supercross the movie,
There you go.
very big feature film.
Yeah.
But he's still, he works with Dave Castillo and all
Dick-
of those guys now, and
Dick
brought
Miller's
them into
son.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I know him
It's
well.
interesting, small world.
Yeah.
So anyway, keep going
Anyway.
with this story down there.
Anyway, so, I did all the races there, and we became good friends. And he
How
said-
long? Like a week or so, or how long?
No, it was 4 months.
Oh,
We started in October of '67. We did a few races in Australia, and then we took the boat over to New Zealand, and we did the races there in January and February. And in March, we traveled back, and Jan said, "Yeah, you're going to come with me," because I'd traveled the other way to get to New Zealand. Now I'm coming this way, and we stopped in Hawaii for a day.
Went around the world,
just to
didn't
go
you?
to the beach. Exactly, and came back here, and we did a few races, and we did the Mint 400 together and won it, in March or late March, I think, of '68.
wow. And that race still goes. It just happened, I think.
Yeah, maybe it does. It's changed a lot, of course.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I suppose.
So, yeah.
That's crazy. What a neat. And so was the concept of that trip, were they trying to introduce motorcycle racing more down there? Is that why they were bringing people down, or was it just entertainment for them?
Probably a little bit of both.
A little bit of both? Okay.
Because, they had some international riders there that had a name that could draw some more people in.
Sure.
And, we had a lot of local riders that were really good. They wanted to build, a career out of it, but they didn't know how they would compare to international riders.
Yeah.
So they used that as a judge.
Yeah, benchmark.
Yeah,
Right?
benchmark, that's the word, yeah.
What did you think of New Zealand and Australia versus Europe and where you grew up? Was it
Well-
just a completely different
Well,
world at the time, or?
No, in Australia and New Zealand are very different.
Yes.
Australia is more commercialized. It's all business and big city and that kind of stuff. New Zealand is more farming and sheep and hillsides and that kind of stuff. Of course, they have industry as well.
I think they say that's the land where the men are men and where sheep are scared. I think that was the.
That's probably
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So a lot of things happen in New Zealand because we had the bikes were getting to be a little worn out, and we got hurt a little bit, and we had to travel around, and Jan learned a lot because I took upon me to teach him how to ride motocross, because he was a straightforward
Right.
guy, So we actually had a riverbed where we stayed close to, and we made figure eights, and we taught about how to just lay down and you drag the handlebars in the dirt, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Big berms and stuff that he had never done. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super
Yeah.
cool.
yeah.
How much did Rolf Tiblin, Torsten Hallman, what kind of an impact did they have on you? I mean, you guys were friends, but did they ever coach you, teach you, work with you, or
Well,
what kind of impact did they have on you as a young rider?
now Rolf raced in Europe. He was a big guy. In '64, I had broken my foot, with the metatarsals in my foot. So I was in a cast, and I actually got to know Rolf that way because we traveled together in Europe. Because I was in a cast, so I was driving his car, and he was sleeping in the back seat, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we traveled together, and he introduced me to the Czechish people in Czechia, with CZ, that kind of stuff. So I spent quite a bit of time with Rolf there. And then, of course, when I was riding my Husqvarna army bike and to visit him, that's how we got to know each other. And then later on, when he came to America to have his training center, I worked for Husqvarna still then. So we got together, and so our families were pretty close at the time. And I know his family very well, So
Yeah.
yeah,
Did you work with him at that training center here?
yeah. Well,
Okay.
we worked at the same company for the same
Okay.
with the same goal, but we didn't physically do much
Okay.
work together.
Not the same. Okay. But were they sort of idols to you? Like, did you look up to them as sort of heroes to you, or more friends? You guys were just more friends.
Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Because he, of course, was a world champion, and I was never close to that.
Right,
You
right.
know, I was more of an engineer type guy that worked on technical stuff and then wrote it myself to validate whether it worked or not. But Rolf, he was a champion, and he had, a lot of experience in physical. He was probably the first guy that where physical training, strength, and endurance were important to him. Everybody else, we skied a little bit and we did, running in the snow or whatnot. But Rolf actually had a program put together. He actually did things methodically, and we eventually learned from that. And that's, look at what that's gotten us to now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You also had a relationship with Hiki Mikola. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never met him, but he terrifies me. Just looking at photos of this guy, I don't know. He just looks mean. Was he? I mean, how would you describe him? What can you tell me about him?
Oh, he was a friendly guy.
Really?
Yeah.
He doesn't look like it.
But
It looks like his beard's gonna jump off his face and punch me. He scares me.
But he was dead serious about what he was doing. And the first time I saw him was him and Kalevi Vekkonen came to Husqvarna in the spring of '66 maybe.
Okay.
Must have been, to pick up their bikes, because they were on their way from Finland through Sweden down to Europe to start, because it was still winter up there, and then down in southern Belgium, Holland, even in France, they were much warmer.
Sure.
Right? And
Yeah.
certainly not summer yet. But,
Yeah, not Southern California warm, but
but at the time he came there, he spoke virtually no English, no Swedish for that matter, but he spoke Finnish.
okay.
Which is a very different language.
Okay, I was gonna ask. So there, it's like Portuguese and Spanish, almost just very different.
It's a Slavic language. It's more like Hungarian, apparently, and Bulgaria. I don't know about Hungarian. So a lot of Finns feel, with their Formula One and all, when there's the Hungarian Grand Prix, there's a lot of Finns coming down there because they recognize the language and they
Gotcha.
get by easily.
Interesting.
But Hiki eventually had to learn English, and he did. His English is still not very good, But we used a lot of fun stuff, and I worked on testing for quite some time.
Okay.
And we were working on the bike, and that's eventually. He was the one that actually encouraged me to do the Gunnar Gasser eventually.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because
Okay.
he would the bike Husqvarna at the time was long, forks long, rake.
Yep.
And he would go across the corners and he would fall down and bend the cable, throttle cable. So I figured something has got to be done about this. So as we tested with Hiki, I decided I would do that eventually when I had time to do it. And that took years to get to. But eventually he was the got me started on thinking about
Right.
that. Yeah.
Was he a nice guy then? I mean, how was he with fans?
Now he was
kind of quiet and to himself a little bit.
Here's a good distinction
Okay.
between Torsten, Roger. There was one group that were outgoing. They understood that fan appreciation, having good relationships with fans and whatnot was important.
Yeah.
Auberg and Mikola were not that. They
Okay.
were enclosed. They were introvert. Both of them were, especially Auberg, and eventually Auberg. He was such a talent, and he could have gone so far had he had what everybody has now, an agent. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to go and negotiate. He was
The business side of it,
he didn't understand it. And it was
Interesting.
foreign to him. And eventually, he ended up going back and running his backhoe.
Gosh, that's a shame, huh?
Yeah. But look what Roger and Torsten has accomplished with their careers as a springboard for
Yeah.
what they do now.
Yeah, game changing for the sport.
Yeah.
Both of those guys.
Absolutely.
How did you wind up in the U.S. then? Take me kind of from that Australia or New Zealand trip, and you're working at Husky and racing. How'd you wind up here?
Good tie-in.
Okay.
Good tie-in. So on the way back, Jane says, come with me. We're going to go to California. We're going to ride the Mint 400. We're going to do some desert races. And I did a few desert races. And
how were those two? That's got to be a completely different thing for you,
Yeah.
right? You don't have deserts over there.
that is the fun part. So we did one in near where not Spring Mountain, in the desert out here.
Okay.
And the name will come to me in a minute. And it was regular one, smoke bomb, 500 people on the line. And I'm saying to Jan, how do you do this? He said, well, there's a banner, there's a smoke. I said, okay, I'll follow you, So we're standing on the starting line, and I didn't even sign up because I didn't know how this was going to go.
Yeah.
But I borrowed a Husky from a guy called Lynn Fortner, and he was actually working next to Tracy's in Burbank on Victory Boulevard. And he was a helicopter machinist. He machined and built helicopter parts. He lent me his bike.
Which was what?
Husky 250.
Okay.
Regular. So I'm there next to him, and we kickstart him. And of course, our bike started on the first kick, always. And we're off there. We're in the leading, and there's this guy by the name of Larry Bergquist.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's once on a Bultaco.
Okay.
And we're in the lead somewhere, and I follow him, and he's leading, and I don't know what happened to JM. And, he's first, and I'm following, but I'm not in the race, right? So we get to a couple of these downhills, and the first thing I learned about American riders were they had no idea how to go downhill. So he's slowing down, he's skidding his bike. He's even getting off and walking. I'm just riding down. So I waited at the bottom, and here comes Larry, and eventually he wins the race. And he finds out that he has actually an up pipe on the Bultaco, and he burned his leg because he was really trying too hard. His son, Larry has passed away, but his son is very good at telling the story because Larry wrote it down and had it there. And when he came to the finish line and he was really hurting, he realized I wasn't even in a race, and he was kicking himself because
burned himself up trying to
precisely, So anyway,
this is Larry Rossler's dad. Is that what you said?
Larry Bergquist.
Bergquist. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I started with that, and that's what led to the Mint 400 and so on. But the answer to your question, Edison Dye had learned that I was in the country, and John Penton, who was the East Coast distributor at the time, knew that I was here, and I had met John in Europe for something. So after I had left and gone back to Sweden, apparently they wrote letters to Husqvarna in Sweden saying, this Swedish guy, Gunnar Lindstrom, came here to ride. He could be really useful to us here because his language skills are reasonable, and he knows the bike, and he's a decent rider. So can you send him back? So that's how it started. So I got back home in '68, and in the summer, and I worked at the factory then with a bunch of other stuff. And then they said, we should think you should go in '68 for the Trans Am or whatever we call it at the time.
Yep.
We're sending Torsten Holman over and a few other guys. You can help them, being the go-between guy.
Okay.
So, and you can ride, which was important to me,
Yeah.
but not to them.
Yeah.
So we did that. So '68 I rode with the Trans Am, Joel and Roger and Bickers were there, and we traveled in vans. I was none of this flying in and out and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And we had a great time,
Yeah, well, tell me about those experiences. I mean, talk about if you're a motocross fan, especially that era, you're traveling around with those guys.
Yeah.
Racing in America. I mean, wow, what a cool thing.
What a cool thing, yeah. And a little bit of a war broke out between Bickers and Joel Robert, because Bickers, he rode CZ. And Joel did too. But he would have a marker pen, and he would go and write a little CZ on your bike somewhere, underneath the fenders.
Right.
And we would come out, and Bickers would say, "God damn it, he's getting under here." So they had this little war going on, and eventually somebody spray painted CZ on one of the vans, and that was the end of it.
Oh boy.
That was the end of it.
Yeah, that's a little too far.
But that kind of stuff went on.
Yeah.
And, the brand loyalty at the time. Well, internally it was good, but we had a lot of fun with our competitors, and we never really changed ideas about bikes. But of course, everybody could see what you did.
Sure.
So great time.
Roger told us when he was on the show some stories about Robert, and he just said that guy was such a character. He would constantly pranking people, and he was telling us about this race in South Africa where he emptied a bottle of Jack Daniels or some whiskey, I can't remember what the brand was, and filled it up with iced tea.
Yeah.
And he's just walking around the pits chugging this thing. And everyone's freaking out, and he goes up to the start line for the moto, and he goes to kick his bike, and he misses the Kickstarter, and he's stumbling. And
He's got his helmet on.
Yeah, the helmet on backwards. Have you heard that story? I mean, was he pulling that kind of stuff?
Typical him. He
Yeah.
would do- yeah.
That's funny. Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he seemed like a character.
Yeah. I got to know him quite well when he was here.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say we're friends, but we were acquaintances and we traveled together a few times, and we knew each other well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so how did the racing go here for you in those first couple of ventures when you were coming over for the Trans Ams?
Occasionally I would beat one of the Husqvarna or CZ or other guys, but not on a regular basis. I was a good fill-in guy in between, the top dogs, the Grand Prix guys and the local talent from here that was growing rapidly. I mean, we had Higgins and Weinert and Gary Bailey and other things, people like that.
So you were probably better than the American guys, but just finishing behind. Yeah, those guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about that transition then. So how many years did you do that where you were just coming over for events?
Well, then in '69, I stayed here most of the year as a tourist. I didn't have a visa, so I was a 3 months at a time kind of guy.
Oh, okay.
So I was here and I worked with the dealers. We had service schools for how to repair the bike. And I was a communicator back to Sweden saying, we really are hurting. We need this kind of part is going at a rate which is higher than we thought. So we need to make more parts. And of course, gears for transmissions were our key part because they were high wear if you didn't know what you were doing. Of course, people starting out in Husqvarna didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So before you learn that, we actually had as a policy at Husqvarna to make our own gears. They were made in-house, and they were very sophisticated. The design was not sophisticated. The design was terrible, but the materials, the heat treatment, and how they went together was very critical because the transmission was under such a heavy load. It was earlier transmission from Silverpillen, right? Same engine.
Same one.
Yeah. We managed to, Mr. Hellman managed to put a fourth gear in it in 63, 62. But that was a touch and go. So we needed more of that. So I would communicate that kind of information back to the factory.
Okay. So your role with them, they were kind of saying, hey, why don't you stay over there and help us develop our dealer network? That was part of the assignment they were kind of giving you?
And rider schools, because we always had as an ambition to have an American world champion on Husqvarna. That was a goal stated early on in our development. When Edison Dye and John Penton and eventually Mr. Farnström that became eventually the chief of Husqvarna from a business side here in America. He had an office in New York, and he was selling. He was importing shotguns and sewing machines under the name Viking.
Okay.
Which was Husqvarna.
Yeah. Huh.
And eventually, Edison Dye had sold some of these bikes. So he sold 2 bikes, right? Everybody said. So he said, I'll send money for 5 more. And now the factory saying, well, here's money for 5 more. What are we going to do? We got to better send the bikes because now he's already paid, right? So he got in behind, Edison
Why were
Dye.
they so reluctant, though? If somebody's willing to pay, why wouldn't they be like...
There was no motocross in America. We had a motocross bike. The management was not
And they just
really-
didn't think people would recreationally ride them?
That was unheard of.
It was.
Anybody buying a bike and not racing at a pro level
Absurd.
was unheard of. Because the money,
Yeah.
it was-
What were they going? What would they have sold for back then?
Well, the first bikes were sold for 4,300 Swedish krones.
Okay.
Which is about, at the time, $600-700. I can't remember the exchange rate
ish,
at the time,
yeah.
but
Interesting.
But and I wrote about that eventually, saying the idea of somebody here buying a bike for recreational use was unheard of in America. So the planning and how many can we sell, that kind of stuff was always off because people bought these bikes and eventually now we're skipping 69, 70 when the bikes were 400 bike was so successful. People paid $500, which at the time was a lot of money, for air freight to get
It's
the
almost
bikes.
as much as the bike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were so desirable.
So you guys eventually, as more came in, you were surprised by how many people were buying them even for recreation? Yeah.
And I think it was 68, the retail price was going to go over $1,000. And we had a crisis meeting in 69, must have been, saying, would anybody ever buy a motorcycle that's over $1,000? And eventually we said, well, we got to have to do it because otherwise we're going to lose money.
Yeah.
So they were $1,000 or $1,100 in
U.S.
U.S.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? And I remember 4 years ago, working as an editor, and I had several manufacturers come to me and say, hey, we're asking kind of people in the industry, do you think, at $10,000, if we go over that, is that like...
Same thing.
It's funny, right? Now we're at 10,000 going, man, I don't know. Will anybody really pay that?
Crisis meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody on deck, around the table. What are we going to do? Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. So how long were you doing the kind of back and forth until you moved here?
Well, I got my green card in 1970,
Okay.
71, and it took a while of doing. So then I was more stationed here, and I had a motorhome that I used for them. Me and Gary Bailey were the first to have motorhomes to live in, so we were breaking new ground there.
Yeah.
So, and eventually I lived here in Cardiff by the sea.
Oh, really?
Not far from here. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
When I worked for Husqvarna in San Diego.
Beautiful spot.
Beautiful spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially back then, boy, it's probably incredible.
Yeah. We rented, of course, but still,
well,
yeah.
It's still not affordable.
Yeah.
It's gotten even worse.
Yeah.
And did you think of America? What was it like back then? You'd been to Australia, New Zealand, you'd been around. What was it like?
I was impressed by the fact that the country is made for travel, set up for travel. There are roads, there are hotels, there are restaurants, and, like in Europe, you have to pull off into a city and find some place, behind something,
right,
or the local hotel or something. But here, things were all lined up.
And easier to get from state to state, right?
Oh,
Over
yeah.
there, it's passports.
Interstates, exactly. Yeah. And money, same, you don't have to have different kind of money in your wallet for different countries, which was the next expertise by Rolf Tiblin. He was the one that had wallets with different sections.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he was, and he would show, the biggest wallet. That was typical Rolf, right? You had to have the biggest wallet, right? Yeah. So he had that, and it had all his various sections with French francs and German and Belgium and Dutch and British.
Yeah, I can't imagine, when I talk to guys on the show who raced GPs in that era,
right?
They're money in all these different currencies and different, your passport, your papers,
the carnets.
Carnets.
Yeah.
And then they would even keep money, knowing they were probably going to have to pay off, to get, because they'll look in your van and you got to give them T-shirts or hats, or like there was ways of bribing the guards. I'm like,
well, that was for the eastern side behind the Iron Curtain,
right.
Between Holland, Belgium, Germany, that kind of France and stuff. Often, there was a guy standing there with a gate and he would wave at you. Other times they would check your papers and look at your passport, but it became quite relaxed eventually.
Yeah. It seems super stressful to me. And of course there's no GPS on your phone. So you're reading maps and trying to figure out one country to another. Like
lots of maps.
I don't think people understand what went into moving around that country or, that continent back then. Okay. So how did you meet Malcolm Smith? Did you meet him kind of your first couple times over here?
No. So in 1967, I was at the Husqvarna and now I was an engineer.
Okay.
Now I got a real job. Yeah. And
was it hard for you to quit racing, or were you kind of like, it's time?
Well, they still allowed me to race.
Okay.
Because I was a test engineer, so I was using all these test parts, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah.
So you take your chances, but at least the price was right.
Yeah.
Right? So in the summer of 1967, they come to me and says, you know what? We're going to build 10 or 12 bikes for the 6 days, which goes on in September. And it's in Poland, in Zakopane. And we are going to sponsor, it is a nice team of 6 guys from America. And we're going to have a military team, because the military people were always wanting to buy bikes. And they use this, we're going to test your bikes. That's 6 days, right?
Okay.
But there were also a bunch of people within the military that loved to ride bikes. So they were part of the military 6 days team.
Okay.
But that's besides the point here. So I built 6 bikes for the U.S. team. And, I took production bikes, took them all apart, right gear ratios, run them in, break them in, tighten flywheel nuts, make sure everything is ready to go, build protection for the air cleaner, that kind of stuff. We delivered them to Poland in September of '67, and here comes the American riders. I've written about this many times, so the stories were familiar. Bud Ekins, Malcolm Smith, Leroy Winters, a guy from San Francisco by the name of Johnson, who eventually disappeared, and a guy from St. Louis by the name of Dave Mungenast.
Okay.
Right? And they were the team, the American team. And of course, this is something that Edison put together because they were his strong dealers, and people that he wanted to reward for being Husqvarna dealers here in the U.S.
Okay.
So here we come, and all the bikes are lined up, and I got them all broken in. I've ridden them all. They're perfect, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, so the first guy to get there is Bud Ekins. And I knew about Bud Ekins, and I read about the Big Bear Run and that kind of stuff in magazines at the time.
Okay.
So he looked at the bike and he said, "It looks really funny, this is a little thing, but I guess I'll ride it." And he disappeared, to some outfit somewhere, where
Okay.
to drink a few beers,
Yeah.
And here comes Malcolm, I didn't know Malcolm before. He says, "Oh yeah, this looks nice, So he takes the whole thing apart just to make sure it's good. I said, "Malcolm, it's good. I worked on this one. I got to check."
Oh, is that right?
So he did, And here's Leroy Winters. Have you ever heard of Leroy Winters? He was a dealer in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay.
He smoked cigarillas with a little plastic tip on them now.
Okay.
And he was a character and a great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy and a good rider.
All right.
So he's in there, So he's saying, "Oh, I brought some stuff from my bike." So he brings a seat which is covered, with the stars and stripes, as for the seat cover. So he takes it off and put that on. He has some cover for the tank with stars and stripes and whatnot on it. And he's got this handlebar, this wild board.
Like big old...
Not that big, but a little higher, and I'm going, "Oh my God, can any of these people ride a bike? I have no idea what they can do."
Yeah, the way you're making it sounds like the bike in Easy Rider with,
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. If you saw the bike. But they were all good riders.
Okay. So I was going to ask that. Were they respectable or were people laughing at them?
I think two out of the four got gold medals.
Oh, wow.
They do really good.
Okay.
So
I mean, I know Malcolm was good, but...
He was good. So that's how I met Malcolm. And then when I came back here in '68, now I'd been in New Zealand, right? Of course, I go to see Malcolm, So now I have that connection already. And he's the one that helped us put a bike together for the Mint 400, which we did then. And now we're back to where we talked a little while ago. Yeah.
He's a character, huh? Yeah. I mean, I only got to know him later in life as I got into the sport, but...
Yeah. Well, he was a kid, that had a talent, but not a lot of business acumen, right?
Right.
So he's finally got this. You know the story of Edison and Brick showing up with the bike, and Malcolm writes it and say, "I'm a Greaves rider, but I'll try your bike just for the hell of it." So he tries the Husqvarna and says, "You got yourself a rider." Good old story. He's been told many times by Malcolm. So he rides Husqvarna. He works at K&N Motorcycles in Riverside on 1689 Lacadena Drive. I still remember.
Wow, look at that.
And one of the things that happened there, we're there in '68, and we're talking about he's now in charge of the service shop. And two guys come out, and they look kind of, say, "Do you remember the guy that lived in the house next door? The kid who rode bikes a little bit?" He says, Yeah. Well, he got killed in Vietnam last night. And that really set us back thinking, this is serious business. I mean, there's a war going on and, and people get killed and come back wounded and whatnot. And we had a long thought and a little bit of talk about this whole war thing, what have you. So, and JN's part of the whole discussion there. So that's something that was really what do you call it? You recognize, that.
Yeah, kind of an eye opener for you guys.
That's the word.
Yeah.
That's the word. So we put together the bike for the Mint 400 there, and it worked there. And then we met this guy. He was from Hawaii. He was a big car dealer, Ford dealer. So what the heck was his name? And he was also buying motorcycles, Husqvarnas. And he'd been given an assignment. He said, "Malcolm, anytime a new bike comes out from Husqvarna, prepare it and send it to me in Hawaii." Which, of course, Malcolm did.
Oh, any new model or
new
year.
model,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he took us to lunch at the Mexican place there, and we're all talking, and Malcolm says, I'm so busy at the shop and all, and he says, hey, guy says, Malcolm, if you're ever going to make any money, you got to sell things. You can't be a service guy. You got to sell things.
Yeah.
And Malcolm is going, what? And I'm learning too, right?
Yeah.
I'm here to sing. So the next thing you know is Malcolm is getting into accessories and starting to sell, his boots and getting to what. But in my opinion, there may have been other things that influenced Malcolm at the time. But from my perspective, where I sat,
that was a turning.
Jimmy Pfluger.
Okay.
Jimmy Pfluger was the guy told Malcolm like this: you got to sell things, Malcolm, to make any money.
That was a fork in his road.
I think so.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of that guy. So he was probably inconsequential in the sport in general, but for Malcolm, that was a big influence on him.
Big car dealer in Hawaii and road bikes on the side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a quick break. We still got a lot to get through, but I'm going to take a fast break here. Stay tuned. This is our Troy Lee Designs Timeout. We're going to be back here with more Gunnar Lindstrom. There's a new product on the market that's going to help you with your riding and racing, and it's Elevate Action Sports. If you've not yet gone and checked it out at elevateactionsports.com, it's a collective of riding coaches, the likes of which has never been put together. Grant Langston, Ryan Hughes, Jeff Emick, Johnny Campbell, and myself, David Pingree, bringing all of our years of experience in professional racing to one place with professionally produced videos and all kinds of supporting staff to help you with your mental side of racing, your physical side, your bike setup, your bike maintenance. We cover it all. Get to Elevate Action Sports right now and join the community.
Dunlop. There is a reason every AMA championship in the past decade was won on Dunlop tires. They are the best. Choose the best performing tire and a brand that has never wavered in their support of our sport. Choose Dunlop. Pro Circuit. Pro Circuit products are designed with one goal in mind: winning. Through passion and hard work, Pro Circuit has operated the most successful 250 team in the history of the sport. They use that same formula when developing exhaust, engine, and suspension parts for every brand. When only the highest level of performance is acceptable, trust Pro Circuit.
Since 2009, Seat Concepts has been dedicated to making the best aftermarket seats. More comfort, more grip, more riding. For 10 years, we've continued to raise the bar. Innovation and American craftsmanship make Seat Concepts the world-leading manufacturer of power sports seats.
Something from nothing. That's what Nihilo Concepts is about. It starts with a spark, an idea, a concept, which leads to a design, and finishes with engineered excellence with the highest quality products created with durability in mind. All our products are made in the USA at our state-of-the-art facility in Stuart, Florida. Whether you are a weekend warrior, ride for fun, or at the highest level of competition, Nihilo Concepts offers innovative titanium, aluminum, and carbon fiber parts for your dirt bike. We offer a wide variety of products that you can customize to your liking. Browse our site for foot pegs, brake tips, engine components, specialty tools, frame grip tape, lever grips, carbon fiber components, motor stands, our secondary on-switch, plus much more. Head to NihiloConcepts.com and see for yourself why factory teams like Red Bull KTM, Rockstar Husqvarna, Troy Lee Designs Gas, Orange Brigade, Club MX, KLM Gas, and some of the fastest riders in the world choose Nihilo Concepts.
Specialized Bicycles. Specialized leads the way in the world of bicycling. Whether it's cross-country racing, downhill, e-bikes, enduro, road, gravel, dual slalom, dirt jumping, or all mountain bikes that do it all, Specialized has the perfect ride for you. The brand is synonymous with engineering excellence and innovation that steers the industry. Visit your local Specialized dealer for a test ride and see just how good Specialized products are.
I try to keep on keeping on.
With a rich history in motocross, ProX has been dedicated to supplying quality components since 1975. Whether you're rebuilding an engine or just need a new chain, ProX Racing Parts aims to bridge the gap between OE quality and affordability. ProX has over 9,000 part numbers and over 60 different product types that are manufactured by highly reputable or even OEM suppliers and are offered at affordable prices to help keep riders on the bike instead of in the garage. Visit ProX.com to search parts for your bike or check them out at your favorite online or local dealer.
Audio Jungle.
The guys are just breaking in their race bikes, which will leave on the semi this Saturday to go to the first Supercross for our coast in Orlando. So the guys are just be goofing off a little bit, do some cool photos, do some cool videos. When you go racing, you want to do well, but a big key is keeping the bikes on the track. That's why we chose to work with Motul.
Expectations coming in as a rookie is just to try and get my feet wet and honestly just send it, see where I end up and do my best out there, but just ride aggressive and ride like myself in practice and I should have a good time.
Challenges of this sport, I believe, is just simply staying healthy. With how fast we're going and what we're doing, your margin for mistake is really, really small.
Stay Sick. If you have little rippers, then you have had to have seen Stay Sick bikes by now. We have created bike and experiences that allow kids to develop sooner and empower them to find their own ride. From learning to ride to sharpening skills, the Stay Sick promise is accelerated growth. Whatever path your family chooses, it's going to be the ride of your life. Stay Sick Stability Cycles.
I'm on vacation every single day because I love my occupation. I'm on vacation. If you don't like your life, then you should go and change it.
Welcome back. That was your Troy Lee Designs timeout. If you guys have not been over to troyleedesigns.com, swing by and check out all the things they've got going on. Brand new GP Pro line. They've got new helmets, new SE5 models, GP models, all kinds of different designs, classic Troy Lee Design styling. Top safety on those helmets, and they're doing paint, they're doing all kinds of stuff, so go check those guys out, troyleedesigns.com. We're proud to have them part of the show, including my Yamaha merch, all Troy Lee Design stuff, so we thank them. Gunnar, getting back to you here, so at what point did they put you in charge of the race team here? What year was that when you started running Husqvarna's race team?
Well, it was 73.
Oh, 73, okay.
Yeah.
So prior to that, you did, like in 72, was that the first year we did nationals here? Or it was recorded as AMA nationals?
Yes, I think so. It was a lot of indecision in the beginning as to what is a national, what is counting towards what, and, not being an American. You remember the story with Pierre and all that stuff, right? So that was a lot of indecision at the time, but we didn't care that much. We just loved to ride, and it was the same thing with the Americans. We had a great time, and whoever counted points and whatnot, fine.
Whatever,
exactly.
It wasn't like anyone was getting rich at the time, right?
No,
so
no.
Really, maybe the most pure form of the sport, you guys were just doing it because you loved it.
Absolutely.
Was the vibe around that time between you guys coming over and Americans, did you get along well? Were the Americans sort of like, oh, these guys coming over here and beating us? Was there tension there at all?
Not that I knew of.
Okay.
And certainly not between the competitors.
Yeah.
Because I think there was the whole idea there of them learning and following and observing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they didn't pay a lot of attention to who won eventually. But as people starting to get better, that becomes a little more tense, speaking.
Maybe late 70s it starts to get a little...
Exactly, and, Gary Bailey, Jimmy Weinert were the first that I recall that were, starting to keep up and learn how to do this thing. Yeah.
So when I go to results and look back through, all I can find for you is 72.
Yes.
Everything prior to that would have been trans AMAs and things like that, right?
Yep. And there's a reason for that we'll come to maybe in a bit.
Okay. But I just want to go through this 72 season because you did quite well. And, you won Cal Expo, which I was trying to figure out where that was.
Yeah, that was in Sacramento.
Sacramento? Okay.
Sacramento Fairgrounds.
So Cal Expo, and you won Straddle Line Park. No idea where that is. What was Straddle Line?
That sounds like Kansas to me.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds about right. But seconds at Saddleback, second at Road Atlanta. You did great that season.
Yeah.
And, as we alluded to, there wasn't a lot of money probably to just be a professional racer here in America at the time. Right. Is that why when you were offered that management position the next year, you went, this is the right way to go?
Yes, but there's a good reason behind it.
Okay.
That we'll get to now.
Okay.
63, Husqvarna made 100 bikes. And according to Torsten, that was the most competitive, the best bike ever. He really, and of course he became world champion.
Yeah.
And so on. And then of course Edison Dye gets in 66 and bikes come over here and we're doing really good. But we're still only a 4-speed. And everybody over here saying, wish I had another gear. We had the compromise, which you call an 8-speed, which was a 2-speed primary.
Okay.
So we had 2 times 4 technically,
right.
But in reality it was more like 5.5 gears, so to speak. But the intent was eventually to have a real gearbox and a real transmission with 5 or 6 gears.
Sure.
Right.
And what was the challenge to making that happen? Seems like you just add another gear onto the spline. What was it, space, or what was the challenge then?
Space is actually the best word because the distance between the 2 shafts were too small. So you cannot get, the ratio you want or the other way,
Gotcha.
12 fifth gear and all. And the shifting mechanism was initially built on a moped. We had a fork that moved the gears instead of a shifting drum.
Okay.
Or a plate in the case of CZ.
Okay.
And this fork moved it, and originally it was a moped transmission. We call it left.
Not a lot of tension on
We
those.
call it left and right. Boom, there was the first gear, and then the other side was second gear, and the middle was neutral. So then it became a 3-speed for Silver Pill, and eventually 4-speed for that. But the need for, and we talked about the gears being our, and so on. So the need or the demand from the market was always to have 5-speed. And there was also a need to have 125, and we had talked about that for a long time. Edison and even John Penton, wanted a 125, and we're all saying, 125, there's really no market, there's not that many bikes. In Europe, it was non-existent.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Were you making 500s at the time, 250, 500, or just 250?
250s and 360s, which eventually in 69 grew to become a 400.
Okay.
360, long story there about technical difficulties and cost and investment that we didn't have and that kind of stuff. We were still treated at the factory as sort of an outcast. The factory itself, were, sewing machines and had been guns for a long time, not anymore after 70. And they had what they call the white goods, which was, refrigerators, washing machines, that kind of stuff.
That's where the money was, right?
That's where the money was, yeah. So, and we, Husqvarna people, motorcycle people, were giving Husqvarna a great name all over the world. I'd been in New Zealand and winning races and Husqvarna, but the one of the beefs we had with the PR side and the advertising side of Husqvarna was that they would never give us credit for the great name, the name we put out of Husqvarna literally all over the world.
Yeah.
And that was unanimous. We all thought that. And Mr. Hellman, who was in charge, there said the same thing. They said, darn it, if we could get these advertising folks to give us some money, because we are the one that is spreading the name all over, sewing machines for that matter, But it never came to that. It never came to that. So we always had to carry our own. And in the beginning...
Was that a case of maybe just the marketing team that didn't understand or know motorcycles, or was it the owner, whoever the CEO was at the time, that didn't have a passion for racing?
The board, yeah. There was a board.
Because you see that with, even currently, or if you look at Honda in the 80s, I use that as an example, because that, Sakuro Honda loved racing. And man, when he was in the driver's seat, he put a lot of money towards racing, right?
Yeah.
But as that has changed, and you see it with different manufacturers over the years, if the man running things doesn't care about racing, boy, that budget thins way out and you see it.
You have to justify the expense in a much more rigorous and solid way. You know, saying
it can't just be emotion.
It's a numbers game then. You know, okay, the race team is going to cost us $1 million. You know, what do we get back? You know, well, we'll get name recognition worth $500,000. No go. Well, if recognition is $2 million, now it's a good deal, right? So that's how the bean counters, right?
Yeah, right.
The bean counters taking over from the emotional owner and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So with Husqvarna, you know, we had a demand for a long time for this 5-speed, you know, real engine with a better shifting, you know, and this and that. And we had also started looking at the 2-cylinder bike at the time, at two 250s next to each other, you know, which was a 500. And there was also a demand from Edison Dye saying, I can sell, because he had in 68, 69 come up with the idea of this compromise, you know, with a road bike, you know, that was actually a motocross bike with lights on it, which we now call dual purpose, right? He thought of that
dual
first.
Sport. He was the original dual sport.
He was the older one. And Yamaha DT1s were part of that thing as it's developed, you know, what have you. So in 69, 70, we're winning races. Auberg's a world champion, you know, twice, and Mikola is doing good, you know, as a 250 guy. And finally, the board is breaking down and saying, wow, you know, you guys are doing so good. You know, we were actually going to allocate some money now to building a new engine, to building a new manufacturing plant. And they started that in 71. And everything is going on. And now I'm in America, right? So I have a little bit of a distance to the idea that this new engine comes out. And this new engine comes out and it's terrible.
Oh, no.
It's overweight, you know. It's got this huge clutch on it. You know, I mean, some of the technical stuff, it doesn't matter, but it is not very good. So in 72, we are struggling, you know, and I kind of did my own experiment, and I was surprised to see the results you had there, because I didn't think I did that well in 72, because it was with the new, what we call the 5-speed.
Okay.
The big engine. It was literally.
That was what you guys called it.
Literally was a big engine. Some people have other names that are not so.
We can't say.
You know, exactly, you know, and something has to do with shipping and, you know, and anchoring boats and that kind of stuff. You know, but anyway, the engine was not very good. And so the thinking was that I'm going to give up this riding part because I cannot contribute anymore as a rider. You know, we had new guys now, Mark and Blackwell and Billy Grossi and all these, Bob Grossi and all these other people, and Billy too for that matter. And so the thing to do now, we need to develop the bikes. We've lost our way. So in 73, we're going to have this racing team here in America. And we're going to try to do well and work on the bikes and what have you. So I was then accepted the management job of that. Not so much to manage the team as to how to travel and how to do this and that, but from a technical side. And we realized pretty quickly that this bike has a lot of not only is it overweight, but it's also have a lot of other deficiencies. So in 72, I had been back to the factory and I said, this is not going. And here is something that I think you can appreciate. You know, up till that point, we had been incredibly successful. You know, we had winning left and right. You know, world championships, Swedish and American, desert, you know, Baja and whatnot. And the only real, I've used this saying before, but the only real conflict we had was who's going to pay for dinner on Sunday night? You know, it is easy to work for a company that is doing well,
right,
that is developing, that is growing, you know, and, you know, wow, you know, patting people on the back was the only thing we needed to do. Wow. And then suddenly in 72 comes this backwash. It's terrible.
And which bike is then excelling? If you guys are kind of not making that step forward, which bikes were the Japanese coming in at that time?
Yeah, and Mako was doing good.
Mako,
yeah,
okay.
In Europe. And the Hondas didn't come until 73, right? The Jones brothers were in 73, I think. And Yamaha came slightly after that because they won the world championship in 73, you know. But now Torsten had moved to Yamaha, you know, and I had moved to Honda.
Yeah.
But now we're skipping ahead.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So this is the time in any organization where you're tested, where management, leadership, and initiative is tested. And I have to say, none of us at Husqvarna passed that test.
Oh.
We didn't know what to do.
Okay.
It is your damn fault, you know. Oh no, the riders are hurt. You know, he's got a bad elbow. It's something else going on. You know, and we don't have the right this and that. Instead of a blame game, the management wasn't there to gather us all, saying, "Guys, you know, we got to come up with a plan."
Yeah, doesn't matter whose fault it is.
That's
How are we going to solve it? Let's go.
We didn't have that experience. We didn't have that knowledge, and we didn't. So it became a terrible time of Husqvarna, you know, and what have you. So in '73 with the team, we still had this old ugly engine to work with, and you know, with a lot of rotating weight, it had an enormous clutch on it, which we didn't appreciate the negative of at the time, and you know what we call rotating weight, you know, and it didn't go well at all. And in Europe. And the team struggled. You know, we had a good team and good people, good riders, but we couldn't produce the results. You know, so you know, I'm realizing now in '73 that we need something different. You know, and they had been starting to work in Europe on a new engine right away, which was initially based on the 125 that we had just come out with. The 125 engine was quite good, and it was competitive, but now we're off on a separate issue, but just as our 125 came out, guess what comes out? The Honda Elsinore. And it just blew it away.
That was a game changer for us.
It was a game changer. And we had survived well if it wasn't for the Honda Elsinore 125. But that's a side issue, you know. But so with this new 250 engine comes out, you know, a little one, you know, we call the small engine now as opposed to the big one. Kind of funny. And I realized in '73 that there's nothing for me here to do in America. We need to work on technical issues. We need to build a new frame. We need to work on this and that. Torsten had left, you know, and joined Yamaha. And we had lost a lot of the riders to others. Not so much maybe because of Husqvarna was not as good as it could be, but the competition started hiring, you know, Suzuki and Roger and Joel and Kawasaki came in, you know, and started. Yamaha had already hired, you know, Håkan Anderson. So now there was competition, which we didn't have before, you know. Oh, well, I mean, Maiko and CZ were still there, but, you know.
They were all putting in comparable efforts, and it seemed like the Japanese went, we're going to raise the bar way up.
And, for example, in 1970, when Joel rode the first 250 Grand Prix in Spain and won, you know, our observer, Mr. Hellman, had been there, you know, and he came back and he sat us down in a room and said, you know, guys, he said, we're in trouble. You know, their effort is 110%. You know, they have spare bikes, they have mechanics, you know, they have spare parts, you know. And Torsten Holman came home not long after that saying, you know, I'm not going to do this anymore unless I have a mechanic. I mean, that was the level we were on at the time. And that was sort of the big change, you know. So back to what I was doing. So I realized in '74, I can't do much more good in Sweden, working at the factory, working on technical issues and whatnot. And we had a new frame that came out then with the lay-down shocks. You know, we had a new small engine. The bike was really competitive.
This was when you went to single shock or lay-down duals?
Two lay-down.
Gotcha, yeah.
You know, this is '74.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So, yeah. It took Husqvarna a long time to get to single shock. That's a long story.
Well, I want to hear your story.
On another day.
You said you got really into suspension development. I want to talk about that.
Exactly. So we worked on that. And we had an engineer there by name of Tommy Malm. And he was the cleverest guy of the whole bunch. He was the one that should have run.
Swedish guy?
Swedish guy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And he designed this frame with the new lay-down shocks. So we had new Girling shocks made for it longer and whatnot. And here's a funny story. So when you design springs, you know, there's calculations to make a spring from scratch. It's a long, and at the time we had slide rules. There was no computers,
right?
You know, some stuff. So, you know, Tommy Malms invents these things. We have to have this shock, and he needs a new spring, and he actually then convinced management that this is what we need to do. This is the way to go. This is the right direction. So we needed a long shock. And the only people we knew were Girling.
Okay.
So he, at the time, got to fly from Sweden to England to work with Girling for a week. Unheard of that somebody would fly, on an airplane, to go to Girling and work with them on the shock, And he did, and he came back and he had these shocks with him, they had tested it out. But he said, and let's finish the spring story. So now he goes to the design guys. They say, I need the spring. It's going to be this long, and this amount of coils, and it's going to have this rate, And the guy goes, do you know how many calculations there are to make a spring on a slide rule? He says, yeah, but, why don't you get started? I want to do that. So Tommy disappears one day. He comes back at 5 o'clock, when we sign off, clock out, and nobody's asking him any question. Next day, he's gone again. And he comes back at the end of the second day, and he's got this piece of paper in his hand that says, Urban, here's your spring calculation. Complete other thing. And we goes, how'd you do that? He says, well, he said, up here in the lab, we have a laboratory for advanced, whatever is usually done by the kitchen people. He said, they have something up there called a computer. And you can actually put numbers in, and it calculates things for you. And we go, that's not going to go there. This is just a fad, nothing will ever come of that.
Yeah, sounds ridiculous.
Slide rules will rule,
Yeah.
No fun intended. So anyway, we built the spring, and Tommy puts it all together, and we build a bike for Mikola, and he becomes the world champion in '74, and so we worked with him. That's how I got to know Mikola quite well. And one funny story was that, that the shifting, for the transmission, left side shifting now for the first time, and the shift lever was long, and the shaft was installed near the foot peg. So you almost had to shift backwards, like you had to pull, with your foot, and it was not easy to do, and you missed a lot of shifts.
Yeah.
And we are test riding it ourselves there, me and a guy there, riding, and we figured out, this is not right, you shouldn't have to, we're missing a lot of shifts, because you can't. So we built a little linkage saying that the shift shaft coming out of it should really be where your ankle is, because everything rotates around your ankle.
Right.
The bone there. So we built a little linkage out of, very agricultural style,
Right.
on the outside. And we figured, it actually starts to feel good, And we could change the ratio so the movement is not so long, because it's all about leverages and stuff. So we built one of those, and we tested it, and it worked quite well. So now we built one inside the engine, and I don't know if you've ever seen a Husqvarna engine, but the linkage was still there for years inside, and we welded the case together. And we had an industrial elevator, big one. So me and a fellow standing with a bike, and here comes Mikola. He's on his way up to the lab, right? And he's saying, "What do you got there?" So he sits on it, and he feels the shift and says, "This is good, So he goes back into the lab and he talks to Mr. Hellman and says, we saw that shift thing in the elevator, and they had no idea what it was. But he said, I've seen Gunnar and has the shift thing. I want one. And they go, yeah, but that's just experimental stuff. No. So he goes to Belgium. So he was on his way from Finland through Sweden down to Belgium, which was always the start of the Euro season.
Yep.
So he rides down there, and shifting is not going well. I guess we can assume, right?
In the sand too, right? Extra load on the motor.
So calling by telephone from Belgium to Sweden at the time was not easy. You had to go in and you ask the operator to say, I want to call Sweden, this number. And she says, yes, sir, we'll have a call for you ready at 1 o'clock.
Oh, really?
So at 1 o'clock, they would call you, and they would call Sweden and say, your call to Sweden is now ready. And you would say, hello, and it would work. I mean, this is something for people that have no idea.
What year is
works.
this?
74.
Wow, okay.
Yep. So he calls back, and he's saying, I'm missing a lot of shifts, and I like to try that thingy, that linkage thing, right? They go, yeah, we'll think about it. We'll do something eventually. So, of course, they don't do much. And next Sunday, literally next Sunday, Mikola calls again. He's saying, Where's that shifting? I'm missing a lot of shifts. And I kind of, when you miss shifts, right? So he's saying, yeah, we're going to think about it. So second time, nothing happens. So the third time, he calls back on Monday. Said, what happened to this linkage? He says, if I don't have one here on Friday, I will ride a Yamaha.
Oh.
And now he got some traction.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we didn't realize it was this important. Oh my gosh, Mikola may leave, and so they started working day and night, and they had actually somebody that went down there, take it with him in the baggage to give to Mikola.
He ran the external linkage?
Yeah. No, that was now internal.
Oh, it was
now
internal.
It looked pretty decent.
Okay.
If I had parts, I'd show you too. Because it's remained within Husqvarna for years between that and new transmission. But that was the attitude. I'm saying this to show you the attitude at the time was, we build the bikes, you ride it. If you don't like it, we'll find somebody that does. It was the bottom up type of deal.
Well, and this was really, from what I've gathered, talking to folks who were around that time, the Japanese changed that paradigm, and they said they took ownership and said, okay, you broke our bike. That's on us. Right. We're going to go back and we'll make it better. Prior to that, they would blame riders, right? Like, no, you're just riding this too hard, breaking wheels.
Exactly.
That's your fault.
I talked to Brad about that. He has the story about his chain coming off. Great story, but it's so typical of bottom up versus top down. And now you take this kid riding an 85 cc on, and the kid would say, I'd like the foot pegs to be a little bit higher, lower, whatever. We'll have it for you in the morning, sir.
Yeah,
right?
A little different now.
A little different.
Yeah.
Is it better? I don't know.
We could argue. There's definitely some argument room there.
Anyway, so I spent 74 in Sweden working on the bike, and Mikola won his championship, and we helped him here and there. And
now, was that a pretty cool experience being part of that world championship? I mean,
I wasn't part of the events themselves because I was an engineering guy back home.
But as a Husqvarna guy, and you're
anytime you win a world championship, it's
cool.
a big deal,
Yeah.
right? And and people are pumped, and whatnot. And it was a new frame and a new engine, So we had recovered pretty quickly for 74. So 72, 73 were throwaway years with a big engine, and 74. We had it just going again, and now we're starting to build again along this new line, so the new frame, new suspension, and so in 74, I had actually bought a house in Sweden. I was going to stay home and work with the team and we had been successful enough that I was offered a pretty good position in the technical side of running the thing. We never talked the titles, but anyway, I would be the
lead engineer.
Yeah. That's probably a good way to put it. But there was a director of Motors Products Division. My name was Sven Melkvist. And so I was told, you got to go down to Sven and talk to Sven first because he is the final say. And he didn't approve it.
Okay.
So I said, well, Sven, if I don't have your confidence, I can't work for Husqvarna anymore. You're in charge. And if I don't have... So I quit.
Oh, wow.
December 13, 1974.
Do you remember what time?
I don't. But I actually went to there's a little store next to it that sold office equipment, and I bought a little blue typewriter, and I typed my resignation letter on that typewriter.
Wow.
So then, now it's the end of 74, December 74, right? What are you going to do? Well, I had several offers over here. One of them, I had talked to Dirt Bike Magazine for a long time, saying, I'm really interested in what you do. Because then, at that time, I realized how little we knew about our competitors. I had never really run a CZ or a Mako for that matter. We had no idea. We were actually discouraged from trying our competitors' bikes.
Isn't that interesting? Another big distinction from today where, I don't know if they like this to be told, but you go you go out to a Honda test, they've got a Yamaha, a Cowie, a KTM, they've got them all.
At some point
they're riding them back to back to back to back.
At some point they do.
Yeah.
When you are in the timeline where you can actually change things.
Right.
Once you've pushed the button and go,
sure.
You probably don't do that much anymore. Yeah. But when I worked with Honda, we come to that in a second. So I called, Chet Hayberger was in charge of Dirt Bike Magazine at the time. I said, that offer still stands. You say, oh yeah, we'll love to see you. Come on over here. You know.
So it was a test rider / editor position. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, I wasn't born till 75, but I didn't realize Dirt Rider was around that long. You know, motocross action probably too then as well.
That's just started, you know, with Dick Miller.
Yeah.
You know, and whatnot. And Super Hunky had just left, and Chet Hayberger was in the middle there, and I came in. So I stayed there for 2 years, and you know, this is what I call enthusiasts publications. You know, they don't pay very well. You know, right?
Yeah, tell me about it.
You know, there's like, you know, all these magazines, Flying High and Diving Low and Knitting and Sewing, you know, and all these magazines. And you always get people that want to do that because that's their passion, right? But you can only afford to do it so long, right? So I did it for 2 years, and then I was broke.
You worked yourself broke?
Yeah.
There,
Yeah, and I got to know Dick Miller and others, you know, and we got to know me. Which part of that reason I wanted to do that was that I wanted to see other brands. I wanted to experience riding other bikes. We got to go to these tech briefings with Suzuki, you know, where the engineers would give us graphs and charts, and I'm going, my golly, look at the, you know, the homework they've done that we never even knew the name of how to do that, you know. So there was, I grew so much from that, and I learned how to write, you know, in English, because I wanted to be able to do that and show people I've written in English. You know, it's like kind of a proof that I had some knowledge, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I wanted to learn how to take pictures, which I did too. At the time, of course, we had film and, you know,
which is way more complex than shooting now.
Nichromatics and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, I mean,
that was a science, man.
At the time, you had f-stops and you had, you know, anyway. So I did that for 2 years, and then, you know, I realized the time at the end of this that I need to do something else. So I actually started with my Gunnar Gasser part, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. So
this was going back to Hiki, breaking throttle cables. This was your solution to it. And just briefly describe that. Well, you know, people that know the era will certainly know what it was, but for those who don't,
you know, there was different ways to run the throttle cable out of the handlebars, right? But usually people would have a big loop that would come out and go back into the front, through the front number plate and go onto the curb. And if you fall, or if you load your bike in a van, and they said, like, you would kink the throttle cable. Of course, the most, you know, important part of your whole bike is because if you can't shut off,
a lot of danger.
You're like Lars Lawson says, you're hurting, you know. So, you know, the most important part, and Hiki would of course fall to that side, and his mechanic, Pelle Moss, whom I knew well, you know, he had actually a throttle grip with the cable attached, and the whole cable and the part to the carburetor all ready to go, you know, all wired up. So he would be able to change it in minutes, and I figured something needs to be done here. So I started working on that, and that took me through 77, you know, year that I started that company and all. In the meantime, Honda called, and of course in February 1st, I started with Honda, you know. So,
and your position there was race team manager?
It wasn't at first. I was actually a technical guy at first.
Okay.
And we did a lot of work, and now we can go back and talk about the Yamaha monoshock and what had happened there. So when I started with Honda in 78, the chains were coming off, right? You know, derailing, and we still have worked on suspension part, the red bikes, you know, the old red engines, the whole one that works. And then, you know, the engineering manager says, you know what, could you work with the race team guys a little bit and see if we can figure out what's going on here? So I got one of those bikes, and we put it up on the T-plate and bolted it down, and we're bending on swing arms, and found out that nobody really had any numbers. What is a swing arm supposed to do, and what have you. And that just about at that time, we had started to find out. Now we're going back to 73, when Yamaha came out and says, Håkan Andersson is, you know, he's winning by so much that he got drug tested. Remember that story, right?
No, I don't remember that.
In one race, the Yamaha monoshock was so superior, he was run down at the start, started last, passed everybody and won the race. And at the end, he was so phenomenal that the FIM actually drug tested him because never done before.
Yeah.
But they said,
there's no way.
Nobody could be that fast without being under whatever that would be. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what drugs back then.
What were you doing? Right? You know. Anyway, so they did. This is a Håkan Andersson story for now. But, and Roger would tell you the same thing. We looked at that Yamaha and we couldn't figure out why the hell it was so good. It took years. And at first people saying, well, it's because the shock is under the tank. You know, the Tilken's idea was that, you know, when you hit a bump, it's going to shoot the bike forward, but of course it's not true, you know. And it took us, and the first people, I think, that thought a little bit about the long travel part, because it was longer travel. It was, Gunter at Mako, you know, that moved the shocks up on Willie Bauer's bike and whatnot.
Yep. And what year Yamaha was that?
74.
Okay.
Yeah. The bike came in 73, but in 74 they started, you know, they were widely distributed. I think it came here in 75 as you could buy it over the counter. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we didn't realize that, number one, it had twice the suspension travel, which we didn't think of.
Well, there's your answer, right? I mean, that alone is crazy, right?
And number two, the stability of the rear fork, you know, because of all the triangulation they've done, was 2 or 3 times what we ever thought of on a regular swing arm.
So lateral torsion, or okay.
Yeah. So
and they accomplished that how?
Because
just through the triangle.
You know, the triangulation of the monoshock, you know, when you see the bike, it's got a big triangulation and stiffness. I wish I had a number to give you, but but I don't.
I get the concept.
So anyway, those were the things that made the bike good, not the fact that the shock was under the tank, you know, which has been disputed many times later. So
I've never heard that theory that hitting bumps shot the bike forward.
Yeah, that was. Oh, you haven't heard the story?
No.
So Roger would tell you this. They tested. Well, back here now. So Sylvain Geboers, whom I know a little bit, but not very well.
Okay.
He was a CZ factory rider. He lived in Belgium there. And every other week, you know, the frames on those CZs would crack. You know, they needed welding. So we went to this welding shop run by a name called Lucien Tilkens. And he was an expert fabricator and welder and whatnot. And he would weld his frame up and he would put it back together and ride Grand Prix. And at one point, Sylvain told me this himself. He said, Mr. Tilken says, you know what? Could I build a frame for you that won't break? Of course, you know.
Please.
That is our Achilles heel, you know. So he said, all right, I'll do that. He said, give me some frame parts and whatnot. So he took this bike and modified it, and he had this long shock come from a Citroen car under the tank. And the frame is still with the International Motocross Museum. If you follow them, Terry Good's museum, he has that frame.
Oh, is that right?
And he built it. And the bike was fabulous. And it's going straight, you know, and, you know, the shock is under the tank. And Roger and Sylvain are riding it, you know, and they're saying, this is great. And there was actually a straightaway, Roger can tell you this, with trees on both sides, you know, big chops. And they could go through that thing much quicker than they could on the standard CZ. But they realized that, you know, the CZ is not going to pay you to get this done and whatnot. So they approached Suzuki because eventually Roger and Joel had gone to Suzuki. Mm-hmm. So they are actually building a Suzuki now. And this is something Roger would tell about. To take Suzuki frames and whatnot that they had, you know, they were used up, so to speak, and give them to Mr. Tilkens to modify and build and weld was a no-no in Suzuki land, right? You don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't do that. But they did. And they built this bike together and they rode it and it was clearly better. And they have this straightaway between the trees. Is it in mole or lumen? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Roger will tell you. This is his story.
Okay.
And they're going through this straightaway and they can go considerably faster and safer, you know. So they're bringing Suzuki people in. I say, we really got to get this thing, you know. I mean, Mr. Tilkens is going to sell this patent on this thing, you know, and it's going to cost you. So they brought in the Suzuki engineer, and Mr. Tilkens is there, and he's telling them, this is great stuff. Shock is under the tank. It shoots the bike forward when you hit the bumps. And the Suzuki guy, of course, who's an educated guy, says, no, that's not it. You know? I said, that's not it, you know. So, and Roger and Sylvain say, you know, but this is good. We should get it. But the Suzuki guy say, you know, I cannot justify, technically speaking, I cannot explain technically why this thing is better. Because at the time, we still hadn't figured out the travel and the stability, right? Mr. Tilkens is selling the idea of the under the tank, whatever.
So his logic is no good,
so
but it
Suzuki
works.
passes. Say, we're not going to get it. And Roger is just completely forlorn, right? What the hell are we going to do? So Torsten Hallman is now with Yamaha, right? And Yamaha is next in line to being offered. There's stories here that I can't validate or verify that whether Husqvarna was involved. They probably showed it to several people. But Torsten thinks this could be good. So he's saying, we need to test. And this is now the modifying Yamaha, right? And they're testing it. And they are behind curtains, there are closed gates, people can't get into the test track, They have people with megaphones saying, hide the bike, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Honda style, they used to do that. Or with radio saying, lock the bike up.
Incredible. Secretive.
So they developed it with Yamaha. And Håkan Ense was quite negative at first. Because he was already winning on the two-shocker, Why do you want to change your winning horse, right? But eventually, in '73, I forgot the name of the track in Belgium. It's one of those, all the tracks in Belgium.
Yep.
Right? And he's bouncing around on his two-shocker. So they wheeled this thing out. Nobody knew what this thing was. And he's wheeling it out, and he's riding its practice, and people are just flabbergasted. No shock? Where are the shocks? And people are just plastered around the thing. They hide the bike after practice, and they wheel it up to the starting line, and people are like flies taking pictures. He wins the race. Can you imagine the shock in the motocross community that's going through here?
Oh, I mean, it must have been just everyone's.
And I'm
talking
really
the
not
town.
the one to tell the story. It's not my story, but it is how it's been told to me. And of course, Yamaha, that puts Yamaha on the map, and they developed the whole
That's
thing.
the monoshock. So they bought the rights to this. They bought the frame and design from him.
Exactly. So now I'm with Honda, right? It's 78, many years later. And I'm bending on this thing, and I'm trying to figure out, because we were losing chains.
And there was a lot of teams losing. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to say Lackey was throwing a lot of chains too on his Kawasaki's, right?
Yeah.
That was a very common thing.
And on the Husky eventually, because he was apparently putting a lot of force on the bike going sideways. So anyway, long story. Brad should tell you the story about Husqvarna and the chains coming off. But
maybe it was Husqvarna. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. He did
exactly
tell
the
me
way
that.
you're talking about it. Saying, well, this other guy doesn't throw any chains. It's got to be you.
Yeah.
You have to cut back a little bit. Maybe you shouldn't go.
Ride it differently.
But Brad is saying that's what I'm hired for. So that's what's happening. But anyway, so here I am now at Honda, and trying to figure out what the chain's coming off. And long story short, I did a lot of work, and we're bending it. And Dave Arnold and I are finally working on this thing, and I give some numbers on and how the chain should stay on. And by the way, I did some of the new chain guides, that actually encloses the sprocket.
Yeah, it was just one side on the outside, right?
I figured out, that when the thing bends, the chain guide's got to go with the sprocket.
Right.
It's not going to go with the swing arm like it was. So I built this new chain guide that closes sprocket. I'm the first one to do that, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I take some pride in that.
Right.
And we built the swing arm, and I gave some numbers, and I wrote a long report, which still have a copy of. That's the time, when you actually drew by hand, on the report and made photocopies. That kind of cut. That was really cut and paste.
Yeah. The original copy and
the
paste.
original cut and paste. And I sent it all to Japan, and then I became the team manager. And then in November of '79, at the Anaheim, because Anaheim was in November at those years, here comes the bike, with monoshock and a new swing arm and all the stuff with the chain guide and all the stuff.
So they were receptive to it right away. Now, when you were designing that and working on that, did you have that Yamaha bike in mind? Had you guys gotten one of those to play with? Or was that work stuff that you couldn't get?
Well, we could have bought a bike,
okay,
but I didn't.
They had it into production in 75, you said?
Yes, 75 you could buy Yamaha monoshocks.
Okay.
Yeah. And people would put them on their pickup trucks and drive down the street, and people would say, there's no shocks. Where's the shocks?
Yeah.
Yeah, remember that. So that happened. But anyway, now with Honda, they built a new, and the first swing arm that came were made out of solid aluminum.
Okay.
Because they need to get the stiffness they wanted.
That was their solution.
That was the solution.
Okay.
So we
heavy though, then, right?
Yeah. So the bikes was really good, and single shock in the back with the linkage. We had tested linkage before at Honda, but we had linkage on each of the shocks in the back. I don't know if you ever seen.
No, I've never seen
pictures,
that.
You know.
That's
and
interesting.
we had that in 1980.
Okay.
And then
who were your team riders at Honda those years?
Donnie Hansen and Chuck Sun, and Marty.
Your
Marty
stat?
Phillips.
Was your stat there?
He had gone by the time.
Okay.
Yeah. But Marty was the best guy I ever worked with as a test rider, Marty Tripes. He was really good.
Really?
Yeah, really good. And we had actually a test day in Santa Maria at the Sun Track out there. Okay. We had rented the place. A long story came out of that. But we had all, the Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki's there, and we rode them all. And that was before we got, the modified bike from Japan. And Marty is a good rider. He is really good at telling you what he needs. He is good at getting traction and getting himself right where the bike has the best traction and not flipping over. And at the end of this, we were struggling. At the end of this, he said, the best bike we have here is the Yamaha. I want to paint it red and race it next year as a Honda.
Marty said that?
Marty said that.
What were you guys... What do you say to that?
We knew we were in trouble, right? Yeah. And we had all these shocks and all these swing arms and all these parts. And that's when the work started, towards the monoshock. And we had as a result of that.
So that following year, you said 79 when it showed up? Was that a works bike? They weren't selling that.
Oh, yeah. No, it was 2 works bikes. Chuck Sun was a rider. We came to Anaheim. And it was water cooled, which we didn't know at the time when we got the bikes.
Oh, really? That was a surprise to even you guys.
Was surprised. And everybody gathering around, and Kawasaki's gathering around saying, we're going to protest this thing because this is dangerous. What if the cap comes off when the rider crashes and somebody gets burned? So big meeting in the trailer, and the compromise was that we promised the safety wire the radiator cap to the radiator.
That's funny.
Solution.
That's a little desperate on their part, right? Like
that's how it goes, right? Yeah. That's what you do.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so how was that 79 works bike? I mean, did you guys eclipse where the Yamaha was?
Yes, I would say so. I haven't thought of it in those terms, but I think we did. But there was a lot of work to do. And then in 1980, Roger is brought in. He's actually first hired by Japan to us to be our test rider, and he was allowed to ride Grand Prix as well. And he took Dave Arnold with him and went to Europe with the new linkage hold. And they did a lot of work in Europe on the linkage, on the ratios.
Okay.
Because although we had many different ratios, we had charts and graphs from the engineers in Japan. And that's good, but we didn't know how they worked and what you needed to do, and as far as adjusting damping with it. And Roger and Dave worked in Europe in 1980 with O-lanes and the damping and getting the linkage ratios and the damping combination right. And as you know, Roger won his last race that year in the Luxembourg Grand Prix with that bike, and he ended up his career on a winning note, Yeah.
So that sounds about right.
A lot of work to be done, yeah.
And there is a big distinction between what looks good on paper, what might, factor out on paper in a mathematical equation versus that doesn't always equate to what feels good on the track, right?
Right, yeah.
So that year was probably very important.
And Dave, put himself into this analysis of linkage ratios and progression curves and whatnot. I was a manager at the time, and I was taken up by other things, not technical solutions of detailed stuff like that. Yeah. Not to say that we didn't have other problems, but...
Dave was a genius. We've had him on the show. Dave Arnold is...
Yeah.
What a great guy.
Great guy.
Did you enjoy working with him? I mean, I'm so fascinated by him,
We live close to up there, so...
Oh, do you?
We talk often.
Yeah, he's great.
But he took on that as a specialty and knows still to this day all the ratios and the geometry of suspension like no other person.
Yeah, and it's definitely a science, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, boy, I kind of lost where we went. So dirt bike, you left there. We talked about that. The Gasser. Why did you leave Honda? 3 good years. This seemed like to me, Honda was that was like the beginning when they, 1979, 80, which now is starting to make more sense when you talk about that 79 Works bike. That was the beginning of, man, for a 10-year run or more.
Right.
They were pouring more money into it than anyone. They had more success than anyone. It was like that. That's an iconic era that I don't think will ever be duplicated.
Right. The Japan wanted to beat Yamaha real well, and there's stories about that. And they assigned a new technical leader by the name of Mr. Miyakoshi.
Okay.
And he came here, and he had unlimited budgets and people to do this thing, and I was part of that. And it was a lot of fun things happen, because when you have unlimited resources and that kind of stuff.
It's every engineer's dream, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, but he was good. And then one funny thing was, he had given us a bunch of shocks to test on the 125s. Still when we still had 2 shocks in the back, 79 then, and we come back and he's saying, "How was it?" I say, "It's terrible. The bikes are all over, and they're bouncing, and the riders are careful and almost afraid." He says, but he said, "What's the lap time?" And I said, "Mr. Miyakoshi, we haven't even gotten to lap times yet, because bikes are so bad." And he's saying, darn it, that is the problem with Americans. It's all about feeling. I need lap times to make a decision. So we still use that now with Lars. I need lap times to make a decision. But the organization at the time was so chaotic within American Honda. We didn't have an org chart, we didn't have a budget, we didn't have a business objective of anything. And I was thrown in to this thing here because the previous manager had quit all of a sudden.
Which was whom? Try to think of who preceded you there.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay.
And so he was not available to me to talk to. So I was thrown into this chaotic situation, and there was no real. I didn't know who I reported to for a while there, and that was just Miyakoshi was the technical guy, right? But so that was very chaotic, and this is what I call it 8 days a week type of a job, right? So we did that for 2 years, and at the time I was just completely wore out. My family was about to fall apart.
Oh, so you were married at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And is your wife? Did you meet her here? Sorry,
no, she was a Swedish girl.
She was Swedish. Okay.
Married with me, yeah. And so I couldn't carry on. And occasionally we talked about things like motorcycling and competition, and it's not even part of LA Times,
Right.
When you read it all. So we had this saying, we're saying, what about if by some decree tomorrow motorcycling is canceled? There's no more motorbikes, street bikes, dirt bikes, nothing at all. What kind of a story would there be in LA Times? Would it be even on the last page? Nobody cares. It's a sporting tool, and it's a very limited number of people, and it's very, isolated in itself. So we said, I'd like to work on something that has more of an impact on society, something that really helps along, that has something to do with everyday life, So many of us talked about, Honda had just started with the automobile. The Accord had just came out. We had little Civics before. And they were the growing, they were just in an exploding type of a view. So I stuck my neck in the door one day and said, can I get a job? They say, come on in, we need everybody we can get. Yeah. So I transferred at the end of 80 to the Honda service department as a service engineer. Okay. And eventually became involved in 2 projects. One was brake systems, and one was electrical systems, and never looked back ever since.
Yeah, I mean, and great insight on your part, right? I mean, cars are not going away, one way, shape, or form. Right. But you're right, dirt bikes are never gonna.
Right.
We always talk about how we want the sport to grow, but it's like, you're only going to capture this much of the population, no matter what. Yeah. It's.
But I mean, I was at the dead end, with the amount of money I put in. I'm sorry, the amount of time I put in,
And you valued your family, right?
Yeah.
Like this is something you probably can relate to this. I look at guys like Roger, who have been doing this for so long. Eric Kehoe was another guy who came to mind, and I think he finally was just like, I'm out.
Yeah.
It is so consuming. Your phone doesn't stop ringing.
That's right.
The hours are insane. You're gone every weekend. It's not. They don't give you Monday off
because you have phone and text and Facebook.
I got a lot of respect for the people that follow that circus around. year
You got
after
to
year.
build a wall around you, and trying to focus on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think Lars is doing a good job of that. You know? So,
Yeah, it's tough. And I don't know that people, they always think, oh, what a dream job.
yeah.
Careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
I managed a team for 2 years, and it was the busiest I had ever been.
That's right.
And I just said,
Right.
I need to spend more time with my family. So
And you
this
know
isn't
how to
gonna work.
you got to know how to handle conflict.
Yeah.
Conflict resolution, is the first thing. And I didn't know that. I had to learn on the job. And I had nobody to talk to, and negotiating, with new riders and whatnot, and what's very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
It's a tough job.
Yeah.
Was there any riders or, from your years there, any riders that you dealt with that stand out that were good or bad or?
Well, Marty Tripes was the guy.
Yeah.
Because he knew.
Yeah.
He knew the bike.
He was a character. Is a character.
He's a character, yeah. Yeah. But at the time, he was not that much of a character. He was just a good rider, and he knew, and he was such a good rider. He could analyze what he needed to do, where he needed to go, how much risk he wanted to take.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the, in Unadilla, I think it was a Grand Prix of sorts, because the Euro riders were there. We're standing in the infield, and he goes around, and that's when they do timing by hand, right? So we can read the time, and he said, what's it going to take to get pole position, whatever you call it now, number one, right? You're a second and a half off. He's saying, I know where to get that, but it's risky. So we said, well, we don't want to take any risks. He said, let me compromise. I'll do a little bit of it and see where we can go. And he goes out, and darn if he didn't do it.
Yeah.
He was top there.
I've heard people talk about how he stood a lot. He could stand up through sections where other guys couldn't, and just...
He's coming back a little bit now, standing up through the corners.
Yeah.
Talk to Plessing about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, but he could do that, and he knew, and he stood a lot, and therefore he could move his weight for traction.
Yeah.
He was really good at it.
That's interesting. Do you feel, was there any feeling of betrayal going to Honda after, you got Husqvarna flowing through your blood,
Yeah.
No. Okay.
No, because they had shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, good point. I didn't know that they had told you no on that one
exactly.
position. So on them, yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to do when I worked there, and if I was going to be in charge of anything, was to work according to a certain system, gathering information, getting the riders in, having test sessions, evaluate the competitors and whatnot, which didn't happen, right? Mm. So here I am a few years later, I'm starting at Honda. And I'll be darned if they don't work exactly like that. And that was such satisfaction to me in that they worked exactly the way that I had envisioned that I wanted to work with Husqvarna.
Bittersweet maybe a little bit though? You kind of wish you could have done that with your
I
home
think
brand.
bittersweet is a good word.
Yeah. Something I've noticed about Honda, and I don't know if the other manufacturers do this as much, at least now, and maybe they didn't then, but let's say you are, head of two-wheel motorsports. You get a few years there, but then they move you to this division. Then a couple years there, they move you to this division. And you may bounce from automobile to like side-by-sides to dirt bikes. And they want you to get a little bit more of a larger feel of the company and learn some things. And because, they don't want you to get stale in that one spot.
True story.
I think that's interesting. In one way, like if you're a motorcycle guy, you might feel like, well, I don't care about cars, what the heck? But I think once people do that, they go, oh, I did learn a lot, and I can apply this from here. And, I think it's smart of them. And I don't know that other brands do that.
Well, it's developing the person, and you're encouraged to take, whatever courses or trainings you can do. And sometimes they bring it in internally. Mm-hmm. They have people coming in, you deal with, negotiating skills, that kind of stuff, which I took, and whatnot. So it's good. And I used to joke about that. I couldn't hold a job within Honda. They kicked me around to several people.
Keep moving your head.
I was in so many different positions, and I was lucky enough to do good in some and maybe not so good in others, but they keep you moving you around because they don't want you to stale.
Yeah.
And stagnate.
Yeah, it's fascinating, theory, and it seems to work really well for them.
Yeah, I was, I wasn't racing with cars, and I was with HPD and the engine manufacturer and that kind of stuff.
That's pretty cool, right? Because you're getting to see stuff that maybe didn't interest you so much before, but then once you dive into it, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
What was your favorite division then of all of the places you went there?
Well, the auto service was the one where things happened, right?
Okay.
You didn't design cars from scratch. That was done in Japan, and we all were often in Japan driving certain new concepts. And one of the best cars I ever drove was actually a supercharged Integra. They built a special engine.
Okay.
We had some turbocharging, but supercharging is different. That was a wonderful car.
Huh.
But it turned out it didn't pass the price.
Oh.
You could build it for a price that people would pay for it, what have you. So we did a lot of work there, and what have you. So, but the most interesting time was when we started the Acura division, 87.
Okay.
We were going to build a luxury brand, and Lexus had just come out, and we were going to duplicate them, and we're going to build this big new car called the Legend. A big V6 engine. We never had a V6 engine before, right?
Oh, okay.
And there were virtually no limits to what you could do or were allowed to do to get it right. And we would go
budgetary or otherwise, just
otherwise. We would go to Japan on a 2-hour notice.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a wonderful time because you had freedom to do things, and some of the things we needed to do that I'd learned from. At the time, I actually became quite involved in wiring, harnesses, and the 82 Accord, which was my first car, as a service engineer, had terrible wiring harnesses. And we came to learn that the wiring in the cars and then what you see in the service manual are not always the same.
Oh, really?
Because, service manuals are made by other people and they follow some drawings. But on the assembly line, they realize when they plug something together, the turn signals don't work the way they should. So they move wires around to get things to work. And that never really ends up, with the service manual folk. So we had a lot of difficulties there when people call us. And in a new model like that, there's always no kind of issues. I mean, we had people open the trunk and the turn signals come on. I mean, I'm not kidding you, but really? It happens to all brands, at first, So we crawling, we inside the car and we, underneath the seat, try to look at harnesses. We said, hell with this thing. So we ordered up harnesses from parts, that's a new part. And we bolted them on pegboards, We had the whole car laid out, the electrical system. And dealers would call in and say, I got this car and it does this and it does that. And we actually established something called the tech line, where dealers were encouraged to call in, when they had odd problems. I don't know how to do this. It doesn't fit. Because once you learn one dealer has a problem, most likely a bunch of other dealers would have the same problem, right? So we became the center of information. And we actually put together this wiring harness, and I have pictures there, of on pegboards of the whole 82 Accord. And eventually we would make a little drawing of this called Honda Wiring, the way the car really is, which was, of course, different from the service manual, right? And, of course, people from Japan saying, you can't do that. There's stuff wrong with the manual. So we showed them, and they go, yeah, maybe there is something going on here. So we hired a company. We did this first ourselves, but we hired a company eventually called Valley Forge, which had a specialty of doing this. And they showed, was a whole book, just the wiring, each connector, where the wires go, what color the wire is. And that was probably one of my biggest accomplishments within Honda, to come up with this wiring manual eventually and get that done. Well,
especially these days, everything's plugged in and wired, and those wiring harnesses are $7,000 a piece.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, just look at a 450 motocross bike.
Yeah,
how many sensors there are there?
We're not far off.
Yeah.
Was there any? You mentioned at Acura there was this really cool car that never made production because cost issues or whatever. Was there ever anything in the motorcycle world that was really trick or something that you thought would work, but budgetary wise or for whatever reason it didn't see production? Can't talk about it.
The automatic.
Oh yeah, whatever. They ran it in Baja or something once, right?
Yeah, there were some races in Japan.
Maybe Chuck
Chuck
Miller rode
Chuck
it.
Miller, maybe so. I didn't have any direct involvement, technically speaking, with it. It was on the horizon. Dave Arnold would know because he took off after I left. Took over after I left.
Right.
And but it was one of those things. It was okay, but it was too expensive, and serviceability was nowhere near what you can do in the pit.
Right.
Taking the side cover off.
Right.
So.
At one point, I want to say didn't Honda make like a mountain bike or a bicycle that was automatic? Do you remember that?
They could have.
Probably was after you left.
After
it would have
me,
been
yeah.
early 90s.
One time after me.
Anyway,
tell me. The auto racing side was very interesting, because we did V8 engines for Indy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I have actually stood in the dyno room. I've seen 1,000 horsepower at 16,000 RPM on the Honda V8.
How far into your ears were your knuckles buried?
Well, the engine is in a different.
Oh,
room.
it's in a okay.
It's standing outside the window, and the exhaust pipes are glowing red on both sides.
Oh, that's got to be cool.
That's something.
Yeah, the Indy and Formula One stuff's got to be really cool to get involved with. Yeah. Where do you see us going technologically with moto? And kind of going back to my original question, how you've seen all of these eras, and when you got started, 4-stroke engines were like considered old technology. We really ran the gamut through 2-stroke technology where, I talked to Mitch as the 4-strokes were just coming in, and he said, we've kind of reached the limit of what we can do on a 2-stroke, keeping it inside of what's affordable, what people will pay. Maybe you could get into more. And now we've got fuel injected 2-strokes, but in terms of performance, I don't know how much more we can get out of that. So I'm curious to think, now here we are, 4-strokes again. We're bumping up against really expensive prices. Where do you see us going? Will it stay 4-stroke and continue to advance? Maybe we look at pneumatic valves. Maybe that doesn't happen. Or is electric really coming?
Yeah.
You think it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you think of that? Like as a motor guy, I hate it.
I am old. I seem to think that somebody needs to hear vroom, vroom, vroom. And if you don't hear that, that's not well. You should go to one of the electric car races, Formula E that they have. Mm-hmm. It's big business now. Mm-hmm. And people there, with their phones, looking at their phones, and they're looking at old. I mean, it's all online, right? It's like, wow, look at this guy. He is 2 kilowatt hours better, halfway than this guy's at. And now he's got this extra boost, Let me push a button here and give him my support. And then now he gets a little more power and down the straightaway. This is a new generation, Us old guys, we have our, we think that car racing has to have vroom, right?
Well, I hear your story about looking at that IndyCar engine, and I mean, it makes me smile.
Yeah.
But I think of an electric bike,
But we're old. Yeah. Look at how many people now have electric bicycles.
Yeah.
And
I don't hate them. I've ridden some electric. The last Alta version that came out,
sure,
there's much better things than that now. I had a blast riding that thing.
Great.
So it's not that they aren't fun. It's just, it's different, and they're going to have their own issues.
Oh, of course there are.
Battery life, battery recharging, replacement.
Absolutely.
So.
Oh yeah.
But you think how long would you say if you had to guess? How long?
Look at the Vork that's out.
I know. I haven't ridden it yet either, but
the problem is, and I actually dealt with this a little bit with AMA and FIM, is that we have no organization that are writing any rules.
Yeah.
And the regular folk, AMA, are afraid to let them in and ride, the 250 race or the 450 race. Because what if they get beat?
Well, how do you, this is the question, and I've heard this discussed amongst the groups of those people who would make those decisions, is it isn't cubic centimeters. They probably screwed up going from 2-stroke to 4 in the number of cc's they allowed, right? Like they underestimated how good you could make a 4-stroke engine.
Yeah. So as a parenthesis, who would imagine a 4-stroke engine turning 14,000 RPM? We didn't turn 14,000 on the 125 2-strokes.
Yeah, it is crazy, right? And
wow,
I don't know where the limit is.
No.
But at least you were dealing in cubic centimeters. You could, I don't know, there's some sort of continuity. Now, how do you gauge it? You know, I don't even know how you measure power. You know.
Well, yeah.
You know, I don't know. So I think they don't know either, and they're trying to figure that out. And
exactly.
Maybe it's yeah. That's for people smarter than me. I just didn't know if maybe you had an answer to that.
I'm not an electronics engineer, but I know there's the ways to limit the output. There's a way to limit how much energy you carry. In other words, the size of the battery.
What about hydrogen or something like that? Is there any potential there? I know a lot of the Japanese manufacturers have been racing endurance series with those kind of cars, and the only byproduct from that is water. So environmentally very sound. A little sketchy refueling, and you're carrying a bomb around, but
no, not at all. But I actually have some knowledge because I worked for the alternative fuels side of Honda for many years. You know, and the joke is, hydrogen is the fuel of the future, and always will be. So
I'm trying to read between the lines, too many problems or issues to make it actually happen?
Yeah, and the problem is mainly is in manufacturing and distribution.
Of hydrogen.
Yeah. There's a little bit of problem that if you're going to run it as a fuel cell, which converts the fuel, you know, back to electric energy. Toyota has done some work trying to run it in the combusting hydrogen in the combustion chambers. You know? In other words, it's a reciprocating engine. And I've kind of lost touch a little bit about that. But the problem with hydrogen, well, is that the hydrogen atoms are so small that they leak through just about everything. You know, to have a tank to hold hydrogen has to be very, very, you know,
dense material.
Dense. There's your word. Yeah, that's a word. And you know, to run it in an engine, it leaks past your piston rings like there's no tomorrow. So that is an issue that Toyota's tackling. Not sure how far they've gone on it, but
interesting.
And you know, we had a hydrogen fuel cell with Honda when I worked for that department. And you know, we had a natural gas car, which I still have one of. You know, works great, but you know, manufacturing and distribution, and therefore refueling, you know, is an issue. Cost is not, you know, it's a cost-benefit ratio.
Yeah, and again, you know, we always think, well, that's the best answer. Why aren't we doing that? But again, motorcycling is. Yeah. Do the manufacturers? I mean, outside of KTM, which just makes motorcycles, do they even really consider us, or are we just sort of a motocross? It's just sort of a side thing. Like, here's a few bucks, kids, go play.
Well, you have to be encouraged by several things. You know, there's new brands coming up, you know.
Sure.
Triumph's coming up, and other brands are going to be involved in. So they must have done their research and found out that there's growth here, you know. You know, it's something we can do and expand. And because any business without growth is stagnating, right? You know, so you have to have growth. And on the other side, street bikes, I'm not into street bikes much, and I don't see a lot of growth there.
Not from a racing or recreation side here.
Yeah.
It seems like the street side only grows in transportation in like third world countries, you know, smaller bikes.
Yeah.
That's where they sell a ton of those things. But
a lot of good stories there. But, you know, that, so in the US, worldwide,
You've lived a fascinating life. It's been so fun just going through it. And had such an impact on our sport that I don't know that everybody really knows, you know, and I don't know if you fully realize it. When you look back at your life and career, what are some of the things you've done that you're most proud of?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the Gunnar Gasser obviously was a successful business that survived for over 10 years when I thought it'd be 2 years. You know, so it went well. And so as far as technical, you know, like I invented this or I did that disappears in the myriad of other inventions and other things you do.
Right.
But I think I'm proud of my kids.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. You know, they've grown up to be good, contributing to the sport, to whatever they chose to do, you know, and they do well.
Do you have other sons or kids outside of Lars?
I have 3 sons and a daughter.
Oh, look at you. Okay.
Yeah.
And what are they? Are they in the industry or no?
Well, no.
Okay.
Lars is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's been in it for longer than I ever was, because he started as a kid. You know, I mean, I know he has told you this, but he wanted to buy a bike from Honda, from the sports department. I was working with cars at the time. So I told him, go and see this guy. And he goes to see the guy at Honda Sports, you know, at the race team. And he says, can I buy an old practice bike? And I said, no, we don't have practice bike. We throw things out. But we have a bunch of stuff in a corner here. You know, there's a frame and there's part of an engine and here's this and that. He said, if you can put this thing together, you can buy it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how he started.
I didn't know that.
And he put it together and got it going. And, you know, somebody, I guess, was impressed. And he said, you know what? Can you put together another one?
You got to be
Then
kidding.
another one and another one. So finally he was working there, you know, cleaning up and putting stuff together.
I didn't know that's how he started there.
That's how he started.
interesting.
And eventually, you know, he was actually paid after a little while.
Yeah, putting all those parts into something they could actually sell.
And then he got involved with the test team, and then he got involved, you know, with Kevin Windham and others, you know. And
he was like special projects guy. He was like
exactly,
the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, he was sort of another one.
Yeah.
You know, so he did good there, and he, you know, it is so different the way he started as a team manager. From I was thrown in there in a chaotic situation. Nobody knew what was going on. Guy had quit, you know, and people were threatening to quit, that I was still there. And, you know, I didn't know anybody who was going to give me some good advice, versus when he started, you know, very well planned, you know. Yeah. He had, you know, Eric Keogh as a mentor for years, you know, and he learned it, he worked this and that. He was in the machine shop, he was here, he was testing, he was there. So he knew the whole business in a different way than I ever did. So he's earned it.
Well, I mean, he's doing a great job. He's racking up 250 championships left and right, and I think, you know, he's got that place going in the right direction. So, well, our last question we ask everybody is how you want to be remembered in the sport of motocross or motorcycling in general.
Oh, that's kind of emotional, but, you know, I wanted to be a good guy that was shot straight, you know, and didn't do any curves and whatnot. So, and contributed to the sport, to the brand, to motorcycling. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
straight shooter.
Going through your story here, I don't see how there's any way you wouldn't be remembered that way. I mean, you're developing products, developing bikes. Yeah. You were into media for a while. I mean, you've done awesome stuff. So, congrats on an amazing career.
Well, thank you.
And are you retired now officially?
Yeah, I'm actually involved in a few small projects as an advisor. Yeah. You know, and what have you. So I may have a Swedish guy coming over here to ride the nationals in this late summer.
Oh yeah.
So I'll be managing that.
Team manager again. Look at you go. What do you do for fun when you're just you got some time on your hands?
I got a little race car, a Formula Ford.
And you drive?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've done that for 30 years.
Buttonwillow and just wherever. Yeah.
Willow Springs.
Cool.
You know, Mid Ohio.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well,
it's
you're
been
welcome.
Just an absolute honor.
Good meeting you too.
Yeah, going through your story. It's fascinating and
yeah.
Hang your head high, man. What a cool career and life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Gunnar Lindstrom. Stay tuned. We're going to be back here to close out the show.
I wanna be bad with you, girl, like we're robbing a bank. I wanna be mad at the world, like it took you away.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in again for a show that I thought was phenomenal. What a great story from Gunnar. And if you're a fan of history of this sport, man, he's on a very, very short list of people who've been there from motocross's early years in Europe and then been a part of bringing it here and then be a part of American racing at Factory Honda and a lot of the inventions and development he was doing. Just awesome story. And what a great guy, super friendly, super nice, so sharp. So stoked we got him on. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, you know, we go out of our way to make sure we're only partnering with high-end quality companies. So if you are in the market for any of our sponsors' stuff, please check them out first. If we don't support them, we can't continue to bring you this show. That's how we fund it. So thank you guys for always tuning in. Appreciate all the support. And a big thank you to Gunnar Lindstrom for making the time to come in today. We'll see you guys soon at our next show.
The Whiskey Throttle Show is brought to you by Yamaha. Join the Blue Crew today and take advantage of all that Yamaha has to offer, including amateur racing trackside support, awesome Yamaha contingency, Jason Rain's demos and instructional classes, and frankly, the most high-performing motorcycles available on the market today. Whether you're looking for a 4-stroke, a 2-stroke, a side-by-side, a quad, a boat, a generator, Yamaha prides themselves on absolute top-level quality and reliability. Rev your heart with Yamaha and join the Blue Crew today. Method Race Wheels, bringing you the lightest, strongest, fastest wheels in off-road for your truck, van, sprinter, UTV, or SUV. They've been dominating the Baja 500 and 1000 and every major off-road event around the world for years with high quality and performance. They also look amazing. They come in a bunch of different styles and colors for your rig, so check them out. You can get 20% off a set of wheels using our code Whiskey Throttle. No capitals, no spaces. 20% off using our code. Check them out. Troy Lee Designs is the leader in off-road motocross apparel and style. So whether you're looking for a cool new paint job for your helmet, maybe your name and number on your helmet lettered on, you're looking for new gear, you're looking for mountain bike gear, off-road gear, they've got the brand new Scout line and GP and SE models. Troy Lee Designs has it all. They've been leading this industry for decades, and they're going to continue to do it. Check out TroyLeeDesigns.com. SKDA is a moto graphics and seat covers company with several offices based around the globe. For too long, bikes and graphics have all looked the same. They just start to blend together. SKDA is working to change that. With super clean and unique design work, a bike with SKDA graphics stands out in a crowd and adds a touch of art to the world of moto. Hey, we need that. SKDA prides itself on providing premium customer service both before and after the sale is made. Visit SKDA online to view the current product range and get in touch with their team to get your bike refreshed. I want to just make a mention here that these guys, not only is their design way outside the box, very, very cool. They'll work with you on custom things. The products are incredible. Okay, they'll speak for themselves. But what's really awesome, and you'll notice this the minute you order one of these, man, they give you an email saying, hey, the product's been shipped. Hey, the product is here. It landed in this spot. Hey, it's coming today. Hey, your product's been delivered. They just so good about staying in touch with you and letting you know where it's at. Customer service is 100%, and that's just something that's rare these days. Check out SKDA. Here at the Whiskey Throttle Show, we're all about supporting brands that support our sport. And there's one tire company that has never walked away from the sport of motocross and supercross, and it's Dunlop. When times got tough and the economy took a crash, Dunlop stepped up and stayed with our sport to support it and the athletes and individuals that love it. Their MX-53 line and MX-33 lines absolutely dominate this sport. Every national championship at the pro level has been won in the last decade, and nearly every single amateur national championship at Loretta Lynn's has been won on a Dunlop. So if you're looking for high performance, you're looking for amazing quality, and you're looking to support a brand that never turns its back on our sport, there's only one choice for you, and it's Dunlop. Pro Circuit is the leader in aftermarket performance and quality. Whether you're looking for a little more horsepower out of your engine, some quality hard parts to improve the way your bike feels and looks, better handling through suspension or linkage arms, Pro Circuit is where you need to stop. It's your one-stop shop. You can go in there and get everything you need to make your motorcycle go from average to exceptional. Pro Circuit's got enough number one plates on their wall to side an entire home, and there's a reason for that. They're very, very good at what they do. The highest quality products with one goal in mind, and that's winning. Check out ProCircuit.com. Nihilo Concepts is leading the way in aftermarket hard parts. With their secondary on-switch device, something that was much needed in this sport, they've been innovating and bringing new products to market. Their latest is the new Nihilo Run Cool brake pistons. They're designed to be stronger than stock and provide exceptional cooling performance with less brake drag. Most OEM calipers pistons are made from aluminum that just can't hold up to the heat and extreme demands of serious racing. When they get hot, the aluminum will distort, causing loss of hydraulic pressure and brake failure. Nihilo's Run Cool pistons limit the area that boiling hot hydraulic fluid is able to come in contact with the piston, leaving 2/3 of the piston volume in open air with breather holes to enhance the cooling ability. It's made of a proprietary stainless blend, which is better at dissipating heat. You have issues with brake fade or brake failure, check out Nihilo Concepts among their many amazing hard parts and carbon fiber parts and titanium. NihiloConcepts.com. Seat Concepts is the leader in motorcycle saddles. If you're looking for a new cover or a new seat entirely, Seat Concepts is the place to go. They make custom seat foams catered to your height, weight, riding ability, riding type. They also have waterproof covers and foams that will not break down if you ride in a lot of inclement weather. And they pride themselves on being much more comfortable than OEM or any other aftermarket company. If you're looking for a new seat or a new cover, Seat Concepts, there's nothing better. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than ProX. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, ProX makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the Polaris RZR 800s. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than ProX. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, ProX makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the... If you've got a little Grom that's looking to get started in the motorcycle world, the best way to get them going is on a Stasic bike. They've got multiple sizes, so from your very young Groms to those who are a little more grown up, you can start them safely. They've got controls that allow you to control the speed so he can't get going too quick. They can touch the ground. There's not a lot of noise to distract them. It's the perfect way to get your child involved in motorcycling at a very young age. And if you've got a kid who's already out ripping, there's series popping up all over. For those of you in Southern California, go to www.ameminicross.com and join their local series. If you're outside of this state, contact your local track and ask them about starting a Stasic class at your local track. Get over to stasic.com and check out all they've got going on. Motul USA, we lean hard on these lubricants to keep us on the track and on the trail. And Motul has proven their quality over and over, most recently with their Dakar win with Ricky Brabeck. They're sponsoring Supercross teams. They're diving into our sport again full throttle, and we're stoked to have them on board. Amazing products, top to bottom. Motul USA, go check them out. And finally, last but not least, Specialized Bicycles. If you are in the market to start pedaling, this is where you want to start. They've got great entry-level bikes all the way up to the Cadillac, the new Levo e-bike, anything in between, man. It doesn't matter what kind of riding you're doing. Go check out and start with Specialized. Don't waste your time on something that's going to break. The derailler's not going to shift after a couple months. Get something quality. These guys make it. Specialized leads that industry. Thanks for watching and listening to the Whiskey Throttle Show. Be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when new shows go up. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And visit whiskeythrottlemedia.com for additional content.